Oh, it's on. You're good.
Good evening, everyone. Believe me when I tell you, I'm thrilled that you're all here. My face may not say that later, but I'm telling you now, I love it when people show up. So thank you all for coming. The planning board meeting of Red Bank will now come to order this 26th day of March. The time is 7 p.m. Notice this meeting is being held in accordance with Public Laws 1975, Chapter 231. An adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a notice sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Two River Times, as well as posted in the main lobby of the municipal building and the municipal website. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Portman,
Here.
Greg Fitzpatrick. Fitzgerald, sorry, absent. Thomas Welsh, absent. Christina Bonatakis, present. Dan Mancuso,
Here.
Lou Demento,
Here.
Barbara Boas. Here. Megan Massey, absent. Wilson Beebe,
Here.
Itzel Hernandez.
Here.
Frederick Stone
Here.
and Brian Barnigan.
Here. Great, we have a couple things on the agenda tonight. First, 222 River Street, Block 71, Lot 5. Just in case. You're right, I'll get to that in a minute, Mary Ellen. Just so everyone knows, when a public school wants to do some work, they kind of have to just come and tell us. And we can let them know if we like it or don't like it. We don't really have any horse in that race from an approval standpoint. So that's what this is the River Street School coming up. But first someone from the public had a comment about the notice of the meeting. Mary Ellen, you want to come up and use one of these microphones, please? So we can deal with that first.
Mary Ellen Mess, 95 Hudson Avenue. I think a lot of us were kind of blindsided by the scheduling of this meeting tonight. And I went to look through what the requirements are, and it seems that the notice of the public hearing should be appear in print 10 days before this hearing to be held. And I have a copy of the notice that was published in the Asbury Park Press dated March 20th, which falls short of the 10-day requirement that appears in the municipal clerk municipal land use
Law.
manual. Right, so and even the online notice is dated March 20th as well. So I'm questioning the validity of the public notice. And also, should I be mistaken, I have to think it really demonstrates a lack of a good faith effort to keep the public informed. I know a lot of us wouldn't have known anything about this hearing had it not been for an article in Red Bank Green. And so I don't know, I may be incorrect, but even if it's you're following the legal letter of the law, I don't think it was done in good faith. I was quite disappointed by Mr. Gant's dismissive comments in Red Bank Green, and to expect the public to digest a 235-page document in 6 days is really very disingenuous. And to expect us to take that 235-page document and actually try to analyze whether or not it actually meets the, what was it, a 166-page document that was the master plan. It just really seems unreasonable to me. It seems unfair. And it doesn't, we're at the beginning of a very lengthy process with this train station development. And it really doesn't bode well to give you make the public feel confident that you're moving forward in good faith.
I appreciate your comments, and we will endeavor to release larger documents for you to read more quickly or sooner. But we published the schedule of our meetings in January. So from and I'm happy to let our attorney speak on this, but my understanding is that we meet the letter of the law because we put the schedule out first in January for the whole year. Whether or not we gave you enough time to read this entire document, I'm not going to argue with you about. It's a lot to read, but.
Well, I'd like to read to you this excerpt from the Municipal Clerk of New Jersey reference.
Sure.
Regarding municipal land use. And it says the municipal clerk publishes the proposed ordinance in the legal newspaper of the municipality at least 10 days prior to the scheduled hearing date. When calculating the advertising date, the date of publication is not counted, and the date of the hearing is counted. Pursuant to NJSA, in the case of the ordinance adopted pursuant to the municipal land use law, all the numbers, including any amendments or supplements thereto, the revisions or codifications thereof, which is in length 6 or more octavo pages of ordinary print, the governing body of any municipality may, notwithstanding the provisions of NJSA 4049-2, satisfy the newspaper publication requirements for the introduction and passage of such ordinance in the following manner. And then it goes on to say that you can make copies available in the municipal building and place them on file. But that does not, I don't think it absolves you from having to specifically provide public notice, printed public notice of the hearing. It just references the fact that this stuff has to also be available at the same time. By publishing an agenda or a schedule of meetings at the beginning of the year, I don't think meets the intent of the law. And I really think if you do proceed, you know, if somebody has the wherewithal to make a legal challenge, I think there will be some merit to that.
So that's where I come in. I'm not going to get into the politics of anything. That's not my job. What you just read is a requirement of the mayor and council. When they're,
No, it's not.
no, it's not. You literally read when an ordinance is being considered for the municipal clerk must publish. That's how you began your quote. That's what you
We are
said.
not doing.
And we are not the mayor and council. This board does not adopt ordinances. This is the planning board. That ordinance, that statute you just read has nothing to do with the planning board. We let you talk. All that is required, and again, I'm not getting into politics about what's right, what's wrong, what's enough time, what's not. All I can do is give you what the legal answer is. Under the Open Public Meetings Act, this board's only required to give 48 hours notice with the posting of the agenda and the publishing of the agenda. That's all that's required by law. That was done in both respects. There actually was no requirement whatsoever for the notice that was published in the paper, which I believe is what you're referring to, which lists what's happening tonight. That notice wasn't even required by law. The board did that out of the goodness of its heart. There's no legal requirement whatsoever for this hearing to have been noticed in the paper with that specificity. All that was required was the notice that the chairman referred to that was published in the paper, which wasn't even required to actually be in the paper, but the town does it, again, to give everybody notice. You just have to notify 2 papers of the hearing that is taking place, and that was done in January. So that's all that's required by law. What you just read is not applicable to the planning board.
So in reading this 235-page document, I do believe it contains a draft ordinance for the council.
And I'm not disagreeing with that, but this is not the council. This board could recommend 10 million ordinances to the council. None of that would have any bearing on whether that ordinance is going to be adopted or not. The council would have to then take that ordinance, introduce it, publish it in the paper pursuant to the statute you just read, giving the adequate 10 days notice. And then the council would have a public hearing, which I'm sure you've been to council meetings, you've seen it before. There's an introduction, then there's a public hearing on the ordinance. The same thing would happen here. So that's what that statute refers to.
I'm not sure I agree with your interpretation.
That's fine. You don't have to, but that's what it is.
I really think that the way this was handled is really disgraceful. And I really don't think it engenders public confidence in this whole process, which I expect to be very lengthy and very contentious. And if you expect people to come here and listen to these presentations and then somehow, you know, put together some kind of coherent statement about, you know, pro or con, it would be really helpful to give people enough time to look through it. Because it's really a daunting.
And
Yes.
this is the only other thing I'm gonna say, under the law, this board's not even required, and I'm not suggesting they're going to open it to the public. Under the law, the board's not even required to open to the public on this type of a proceeding that's happening tonight. They're going to, because this board likes to do that. The law does not require it. This isn't this isn't an application that you're used to coming to where there's an applicant presenting and then there's questioning by the public. That's not this type of application, because it's not an application. All the board is doing is considering a plan that whether to adopt it or not. And then to recommend it to the council. The board wouldn't be adopting it, only the council can adopt it. So there's under the law, strict reading of the law, there's no requirement for public participation whatsoever. The board theoretically and legally could just discuss the plan amongst itself, vote on it, and never open it to the public. But again, they're not going to do that because that's not what this board does. But I just want you to understand that it's not required by law.
Well, I'm not surprised by that because I think the whole process is actually skewed in favor of the developers. And, but I had called Ms. Ebanks several weeks ago and asked her about the legal requirements. And quite frankly, she was unable to tell me. And she wasn't able to tell me either. She assured me that the public would have ample time to review the documents. And when I specifically asked her, well, how long is that? Legally, what are they required to do? And she was unable to answer that question.
Well, we love Shauna. Shauna's not an attorney. So you shouldn't be turning.
Who is?
But Shauna's not an attorney. She's not an attorney, and you shouldn't be expecting to get legal advice from Shauna. And Shauna's doing her best. I don't want to speak for her, but she's doing her best to answer questions when you ask her a question. You can't fault her if she doesn't know a legal answer.
I was not asking her for legal advice. I was asking her for information about the process. And I feel that the employees of the borough should be able to answer these questions that we have so that when we come here, we can be prepared to present our point of view in a rational way that's going to make sense. So for you to say to me that I shouldn't expect the director of planning to answer a very basic question about how much time will we have to review the document, I think that's really very disingenuous. But I'll leave it there, and we'll see how this goes tonight.
And I should be clear, when I was talking about the law, it's state law. It's not Red Bank law. This is New Jersey state law that we're talking about.
And it's terrible.
That is why I was making sure, I was just making it clear for everyone in the public to understand, when I'm not talking about Red Bank law, I'm talking about New Jersey state law.
The land use, New Jersey land use law is really, has stacked the deck against public input. And, you know, the process is really, well, I'll speak to that later.
Well, there's no lack of public input opportunity here at this board. And it's important to me that everybody understand that. And tonight, this is just the redevelopment plan. This is not the site plan that the developer in New Jersey Transit want. That's at a future meeting. This is just whether or not we're recommending the actual redevelopment plan to the mayor and council. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Is someone here for River Street, for the school?
I can speak.
Okay, go ahead.
So, the River Street School, elementary school, Red Bank Elementary School is applying for permits to the New Jersey Department of Education for site upgrades, entry door and canopy at the school. The scope of work includes the installation of a steel entrance canopy with lighting and signage removal and infill of 2 exterior doors, creating 2 interior closets with doors, installation of exterior double doors, remove and installing floors, painting, removal and installation of a new wall mounted unit heater, mechanical and electronic work due to removal and relocation of devices, reconstruction of the existing school driveway, reconstruction and realignment of existing lower school parking lot, installation of an accessible drop-off zone and associated drainage improvements, installation of sidewalk ramp with handrails and set steps with handrails to provide accessible access to lower school entryway, reconstruction of the driveway loop, and the creation of a parking area on the interior of the driveway loop, installation of an accessible parking area, sidewalks along the school frontage, relocation of the utility pole, and the upgrade of site lighting, redesign of courtyard to provide pervious paver pathways and decorative gravel areas, reconstruction of raised concrete staged as an accessible flush pad, and installation of drainage, conversion of existing parking lot to a fenced rubber surface play area with an under drain system, installation of site-wide roof drainage collection to improve drainage conditions on the site. And the plans for this was uploaded in the board packet.
I love engineers, okay? My best friend is an engineer, but this was a tremendous expense on behalf of the borough for the primary school to have to do this. It's a 37-page plan. I don't know, maybe you read it, looked that closely at it, but that's what they want to do. The planning board has a very informal role in this. If anyone has a question or a comment about the school's plan or wants to know anything else about it, you're welcome to come up and ask now. Come on up.
Evening, on Hill 64 Canal Street. In this plan, what note or what recognition was there of the town's safe routes to school and complete streets documents were made? How many bike racks are there going to be in this plan? You know, it's right next to another very important corridor, the Shrewsbury Avenue. And I feel that there should be some reference to that. There may be, I don't know, but the packet only went up, so far as I'm aware, about an hour and a half ago. And so I can't.
I downloaded this morning from the borough website.
And I stand directed 24 hours ago.
Okay.
The attorney himself said you're only obliged to give 48-hour notice. And I only learned of it myself, just an added little article by once again by Red Lion Green.
If there's anything specific that from an engineering standpoint that you've got about this, you need to bring it to the Board of Education because we didn't draft the plan.
I understand that, but you're presenting it. So I'm asking.
They're not. What does the board, as the chairman said, has almost no power over this. This is a capital improvement request by the Board of Education. It comes here almost as, I want to say, a courtesy that the board's supposed to look at it. If the board has an issue with it, they could say so, but the board is not obligated even to listen to the planning board at the end of the day. It's a complete courtesy. As far as the notice is concerned, the notice itself was published was posted last Friday, I believe. So you have the notice. I understand the plans may not have been available last Friday, but this is another issue where, and again, I'm not getting into the politics of it or anything like that. I'm just talking strict legality. There's not even necessary for public comment on something like this. So the chairman's opening it to public comment for the courtesy of the public, but we're not required to, which is why, again, it's not an issue. It's not an impact on the 48-hour notice that those plans were not available on the website last Friday. I'm just straightening that out for the legalities of it. Again, I'm not getting into the politics of it.
I'd just like to remind the mayor, I'd like to remind the chair of this body, I'd like especially to remind the attorney that you are here not just to slam through state regulations or anything else. You are here also to represent the aspirations of this community. And you know, if you're slamming this through and all we're getting is lectures from you, we have to ask, what are you doing there?
So I don't think we're lecturing you. You asked a question. I'm just explaining what the law is because you made a statement that it was a violation of the 48-hour notice. I was just explaining why it's not legally. No one's lecturing you.
Thank you for your comments.
Welcome.
Okay, you're lecturing us.
Anyone else from the public have any comments or questions about the school plan? Anything specific, I encourage you to go to the Board of Education meeting to talk to them specifically about this or any other issue you have with the schools. This is merely as I said, a courtesy on behalf of the Board of Education to the Planning Board. And that's pretty much all that's required about it.
So Mr. Chairman, there is required that you, and again, it's a little bit more than a courtesy because they have to show it to you. And if the board does have any comments on it, you can make those. Otherwise, you can just have a motion and a second and a vote to confirm that you reviewed it and you don't have any comments.
While I agree with the proper bike lanes in town and the ability for students to get to school safely, and I would encourage the Board of Education, not that I'm going to go to a meeting and do it there because I'm not, but I'll do it here. That I would encourage them to take that into account whenever they can. I realize sometimes it's doable, sometimes it's not, but a resolution?
You would make a motion to report, assuming you have no comments and the board has no comments, you would just make a motion to refer it back to report back to the Board of Education that you reviewed it and you have no comments, if that's the case.
I would happily do that, to refer it back to the Board of Education. My comment is, as I said, and to echo a little bit, only a little bit, Mr. Hill, of what Mr. Hill had to say about complete streets and a safe way for children to get to school on a bicycle. Beyond that, I don't have any other comment.
So then that would be included in your motion to report back that comment.
Do we have a second for that? Anyone?
I'll second it.
Are you abstaining?
I am not abstaining.
Mayor Portman?
Yes.
Christina Bonatakis?
Yes.
Dan Kuso?
Yes.
Lou Demento?
Yes.
Barbara Boas?
Yes.
Wilson Bibi?
Yes.
Itzel Hernandez?
Yes.
And Brian Carnigan?
Yes. For the record, Mr. Stone, you are abstaining because you're a member of the Board of Education, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have Marine Park, Block 9, Lot 5. For those of you who haven't driven down there lately, the parking has moved. And there's a very ambitious plan, which I know there were many public meetings about, and who I'm assuming this fine gentleman is going to show us lots of pictures of.
Do you need me to pull up the PowerPoint or no?
If you can, that'd be great. Figure I'd do in paper and on the
So
screen.
these are the proposed site plans for Marine Park. And who's going to speak on this for us this evening?
I am Michael Reiser.
Mike, can you just use the mic? 'Cause it does-
To get this set up.
Yeah.
Michael.
Thank you.
Be an engineer.
Right.
I'm sorry, I was not clear
About what?
about this particular, just will there be questions later?
Yeah, we'll do questions on this.
Very simple.
For those of you who haven't driven down to Marine Park lately, I recommend it highly to get a sense of what's going on and how the job is moving forward, but they have begun. Go ahead, Michael.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Michael Reiser. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. And I'm here on behalf of CME Associates, the Borough Engineers Office. I'm here in accordance with NJSA 4055D-31 to present the plans for Marine Park to the Planning Board for capital review and recommendation. As noted in the Borough Master Plan, Marine Park was significantly affected by Hurricane Sandy and required a phased approach to restore and improve the park for the community's use. Phase 1 consisted of flood mitigation, as well as improvements to the bulkhead and walkway. Phase 2 consisted of a conceptual master plan. The borough hired Kimley Horn to create the Marine Park Master Plan based on the community's input. Key part features of that master plan included that the community envisioned were a children's play area, lawn areas, passive recreation opportunities, stormwater capture, waterfront access, and a welcome plaza. And the plan that I'm presenting today is taking the vision from that Kimley Horn Master Plan to life. So
Michael, just bring that mic closer to your mouth for the folks in the back.
my apologies. Is this good volume?
Everybody in the back here? Thank you.
So if you would direct your attention to the poster board or the screen. I have here the overall site plan for the park. Just to orient, mind oriented for me, just we have Wharf Avenue. This is essentially looking north. We have Wharf Avenue on the right in that shaded area. Down. Yeah, so that's Wharf Avenue, and then that goes up to Union Street where it intersects down. Sorry, that's Union Street there. And if go back to where you first pointed, that is the location of the existing parking lot, and the river is kind of in the top left corner of that plan. Some of the proposed improvements include the big open lawn area where the existing parking lot used to be. As you had mentioned, that has since been deconstructed, and this is part of phase 1 of the plan that was included with the new porous asphalt parking lot that was installed in a location, the old tennis courts. So the plan includes a large green space there, as well as, yep, right there, as well as a amphitheater for, and the meaning of this space is for events, passive recreation. There's talk of concerts there, different seasonal events, fireworks, and a winter village type idea, farmers markets, really just a great space that better utilizes the waterfront, which was a big aspect of that Kimley Horn Master Plan. Also included along the waterfront is a large seating wall that would wrap around the existing concrete walkway. And that's really just a space for the community to sit, view the river. And then as you come around the Horseshoe Marina there, we have a curved pergola in the middle. That again, more seating area for the public to view the river and relax. And then on the other end of the horseshoe, we have the hammock area, which is gonna have some permanent hammocks as well as a garden area there and a seating wall. Coming up the maintenance roadway, the existing asphalt roadway there that goes around, it's for emergency vehicles, fire truck access. We have a small area for food trucks as well as a small seating area. where folks can eat their food. Right. Left, right between where, right, up a little bit. Down a little bit, right there.
All right.
Yeah, you.
Yes, I apologize. I didn't realize I would have to speak into the microphone. I was hoping to.
Bring it with you.
Yeah, you can do the microphone with you if you want.
I'll split words for you.
Someday we're gonna get a better AV system in here.
Someone said it was.
Regardless of how much it costs.
All right, so just to reiterate, here is the green space, here's the amphitheater, here's the seating wall here along the river. This is the river here, here's the existing horseshoe marina. We have a curved pergola here with benches and seating areas for everyone to relax. And then this is that maintenance roadway that's existing. The fire department uses this to access the fire rescue boat, as well as just perform general maintenance for the pump station there. This is our existing porous asphalt parking lot. And then here is this area for potential food trucks, as well as a seating area for people to enjoy and just, eat some food, some picnic tables there. And then, as noted on that Kimley Horn master plan, we have here the entrance plaza area that includes a decorative pergola, decorative tables, and a decorative spray fountain as well. Probably some signage as well, welcome to Marine Park. And then there's other improvements as well. Here, this hatched area shows some repaving to be done, which will connect into the repaving that's being done now. That's gonna include an upsize in the water main that's necessary in talking with the fire department, dry hydrant over here that we need for the fire department, as well as a new boat lift for the rescue boat to help save on maintenance and really just make access to the rescue boat more efficient. Other waterfront features include a kayak launch, a jet ski ramp, or a kayak ramp and a jet ski launch. And stormwater check valves on all of the outfalls, which would allow improved stormwater management. Stormwater would no longer be able to creep up those pipes and flood the park. It would just allow stormwater to flow out, and we feel that that's really gonna help improve the flooding of the area. And then a main component of the park is this playground area. So I will switch it over to this, which is a more zoomed in photo of our playground area. So this is just to orient you, this is the existing bathroom area here, and then this is the Wharf Avenue going down to the hill. Here's our Horseshoe Marina. Here we have the 2 to 5 playground area. That's, they require that you separate by ages. It's a playground specific requirement. This includes, there's a little beaver town, a turtle stream, a small Oasis sailboat, as well as swings for infants. It's a lot of your typical elementary school type equipment. It's made of like natural wood that a company Compan that we're using for anyone that have attended the other meetings. John Marshall from Compan can expand more on that. Then over here, we have the 5 to 12 play area. That includes embankment play, which I'll show on rendering shortly. That's essentially slides and climbing built into the hill and the slope here that we have at Marine Park. It includes a custom pirate ship that goes with the aquatic theme that we're going for here along the river. That includes an access platform for handicapped individuals, so they can access the elevated portion of the ship and not just the bottom portion. And we think that's really great to include in this inclusive playground. We also have a unique quad tower that includes some slides and some climbing aspects. We have multiple bays of swings, including a nesting disc swing that individuals with disabilities can use. We have planting beds throughout. We have an 80-foot zip line over here, and we have a It's called a, double check my notes, bear with me. Tunnel bridge, which is used for climbing, very popular. And with that, I'd like to switch it over to the renderings. This was prepared by our playground manufacturer. Here is kind of an overview of the park. Here you can see the existing horseshoe. We have that quad cube tower here. You have your tunnel bridge, your pirate ship, as well as the little kids playground here, the little kids swings, their sailboat, the big swings there, and then the zip line off in the corner. This picture here, you can see how that ADA access platform would work. So essentially, there's this portion here with a ramp that leads to the elevated portions of that ship. You can see someone with a wheelchair accessing that. We have here the embankment play with the slides, as well as the climbing rope and rock climbing cleats up the slope. And then we have our swings here, your standard swings, your ADA accessible swings, as well as the circular nesting swing there. I did want to note that the plan does necessitate some tree removal, so I've been working with the Borough Shade Tree Committee as well as the Environmental Commission on a proposed planting plan to make up for some of those removed trees. The trees have to be removed in the green space area to make way for the green space area, but a lot of those trees in that area are unhealthy. We've reviewed that with our tree expert. And in terms of the playground area, a lot of those trees had to be removed due to the grading required to make this a completely inclusive playground, which is what the borough has applied for a grant through Green Acres. Just wanted to touch on the state of permits. The CAFRA individual permit from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, we have received that today, as well as the waterfront development permit for the waterfront portions of the park. Army Corps of Engineers were pending, and Freehold Soil Conservation District were pending as well. And then I just wanted to touch on the timeline. We anticipate going to bid for this project in the coming months. And the construction starting in late spring, early summer, with the playground equipment being purchased and installed through state contract in the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. And the goal is to have the entire park complete prior to the winter.
Excuse me, question.
Yes.
You're going to bid, you say, but obviously work has already been done in the parking lots, and the old parking lot has already been removed and is in the process of being constructed. So obviously some of it is already in contract, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you give me the pieces of it?
Yes, so phase one included the construction of the new porous asphalt parking lot that's now where people are parking. And it also included getting started on this open green space. So that includes removal of the existing parking lot and construction of, it's kind of like a drop-off loop with a few spaces there that are primarily for the Marina and Boondocks restaurant down there. So it's just including that drop-off loop and then topsoil and seeding that main green space area, so it can, be used as passive recreation space in the interim while we move to the phase two portion of this.
Thank you.
And with that, I just wanted to touch on, no, sorry, I went through the timeline. That really concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have any questions right now, but I do have a comment.
Oh,
Go
If I
ahead.
may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I am in love with the playground. I'm a retired school teacher, primary, in the kindergarten, first grade, special ed. And I think that this is gonna be one of the best things that Red Bank has done in a long time. And I appreciate the time and the energy that went into doing that much work to get a playground that cohesive for the ADA. And I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the kind words and loving working with the borough on this project. Excited to see it come to life.
Also a comment.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I've already said, I think it's really cool for us to have this big open space where people can continue to meet and play and talk. Thank you for making it as functional as it probably could be and for really making use of that space. I think it's an underutilized space and I'm really excited to see that it's being done correctly. So thank you for all the efforts that went into it and for making it something that every resident is able to enjoy. And it's free. How rare nowadays to be able to enjoy yourself at that level and luxury. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It's free for the kids at least. It's not free for us, is it? Go ahead, Wilson.
Yeah, sorry to beat a dead horse, but I'm gonna do it anyways. On the healthy, mature trees. Why can't we work around that?
It's unfortunately, the grading required in that area. We had worked with the playground manufacturer to utilize the existing slope, but in order to meet the requirements of the Jake's Law funding through Green Acres, it has to be completely inclusive and ADA compliant. And in order to make that happen, the slopes, the area just had to be lowered down there. So I believe in the area, the two large mature trees in the middle, we were dropping about 7 feet in that area. So we had looked at potentially building large retaining walls around it just to keep it. But in reviewing with our licensed tree expert, she just really did not feel that the trees would be able to survive and ultimately would become a hazard no matter what we would do with the grade change. It's unfortunate, but that's why we've worked with the Environmental Commission, the Shade Tree Committee and worked with the borough as well to provide an adequate budget to supplement those plantings. I have some numbers here for you.
How many new trees are you planting?
Yep, that's what I'm pulling up right now. So we have in the proposed planting plan, which Shade Tree Committee reviewed at their last meeting and agreed with. We have 29 new shade trees, 28 new ornamental trees, and hundreds of new shrubs, perennials, and ornamental grasses, as well as some wildflower seed mixes that we're proposing on the top area.
Thank you.
I don't want to appear like a wet blanket, but I think this is a bad decision. I know everyone, I would love to see a inclusive park, but I don't know why we have to excavate the whole hill on Marine Park, which has been a place for events. People go there and socialize. Beauty of it is, it just doesn't make sense to me. Why couldn't it have just been put in the parking lot where you wouldn't have to do all that? It would have saved tons of money and it would preserve the beauty that already exists there. And I think that taking down these mature trees that the Shade Tree Committee planted 10 years ago and are now starting to bear fruit it seems ridiculous when you got an empty parking lot right next to it where you could put it. And this whole thing about, oh, we have to excavate 7 feet and make a retaining wall, that's going to cause, I think, I'm afraid, many problems. The excavation itself will be very erosion causing. And after that, it'll be a problem with a retaining wall holding back. It's just, and it removes the beauty of that hill where events go on now. People go, even when there's not events, there's always people socializing there. And I think this is a big mistake, and I can't support it.
I understand your concerns. If I may, I just want to reiterate, we looked at the possibility of installing retaining walls to do that, but there are none currently proposed. And we are still incorporating the hill. It just has to be graded differently than it is. Currently, there's different areas that are steep that have to be kind of flattened out more. It's a regrade of the area, and the location was consistent with that Kinley Horn master plan. North of that existing bathroom building and look to utilize that existing slope. So that was the idea behind it, but appreciate your
Chair, I have a question for you. Did phase one come before the planning board?
We had public meetings. I remember we had public meeting. There was at least one at the senior center. Was there one here at the board? No. I'm being told no, but there were public meetings showing this plan. At least two, and I think they were probably both at the senior center. I know I was at one of them.
So my follow-up question is, phase two is required as a capital improvement to be presented to this board. Was phase one not also something that should have been presented to the board? And
It could have been presented to the mayor and council. I don't know the answer to that question. Should phase one have been here? You know, I'm gonna turn and ask you.
I don't know enough about phase one to answer your question. I know they're here tonight for capital improvement, which again, is the exact same way the school had to come here. It's exactly the same thing. I don't want to answer with, I wasn't around when I guess phase one happened, so I'd be afraid to answer the question because I just don't have enough information.
Phase one-
hard to throw a wrench in the works, and I don't tend to pursue it, but it strikes me that the project in its totality, if it's a requirement for us to review a capital improvement to make a recommendation to the council, we should have had the whole project as an opportunity.
So if all they were doing, and again, I don't know, but if all they were doing was fixing the parking lot and things like that, they wouldn't have had to have come here for that because that's just a repair. So there's not actually an improvement of the property. So
Well, it was a, we
They moved the parking lot.
we moved the part, we created a new parking lot and we are demolishing old parking lots as we speak. That's that, and I do remember hearing that the playground was going to get larger. We didn't have a plan of this detail back then. It was very, pie in the sky kind of thing, where we were creating this large programming area to the east where the existing parking lot was. And the gazebo, I recall all of that. I don't recall anyone recommending moving the playground to that area because the large grassy area is meant for all residents, whereas the playground was meant for just kids. And I understand your point about the trees. Spent a lot of time here with my kids when they were little, and I would love to spend time in this playground as a grandfather. Although I'm not so sure that's gonna happen, as my children have updated me on that. One of them saying that it will never happen. So I don't know. I do have a nephew who's 4 though, and I'm practicing on. But the playground was always talked about being here, but this is obviously a larger capital improvement than moving the parking lot.
Thank you.
But I know there were public hearings.
Yes.
Anyone else on the board have any questions or comments?
I'll just say one thing. It's-
Go ahead.
I have kids. I think it's a great improvement to the town to have this playground. And I'm looking forward to it. Just to Lou's comment, I do question whether or not that hill could have been incorporated. I mean, it is an amenity. We use that hill also. We love that hill. We go there, we sit in the grass, we lay out blankets. We sit in the shade of the trees in the summertime, and lots of other people do as well. So to lose that, I'm cognizant of the fact that, that's a detriment of this plan. And yeah, it's kind of a question in my mind as well, as if that could have been better incorporated into the playground area. But,
Michael, how much of the hill are we losing?
Didn't speak to the amount of the hill. It's really being reconfigured. It's areas like coming off the bathroom, there's a steep drop there. So it's going to be a steeper drop initially and then kind of gradually downhill. And then
I look, when, at some point in time, if you don't have a slide, could you turn it this way too?
Oh, I'll bring it up.
I don't know what it is.
It's just the playground patch.
Oh, okay, I got that right.
So you're talking like about a 6-foot elevation change from the canopy where the bathrooms are to the beginning of the playground, is that about right? Am I reading that right?
Yes, essentially, yes. So coming off here. Yes, about 6 feet coming down and then gradually going down here. And then this walkway through here, which would be the ADA access coming from the parking lot, is flat. And then again, we have the embankment play that's being incorporated into the hill here. So there, it's more just being reconfigured, the hill. It's steep drop here, gradual drop. And then this way you have more of a steep drop for the embankment and then gradual out to here. So you still do have those hilly components. The area up here, which is all just, the grass space now, that grade's remaining unchanged. All of the trees up in this area are remaining as well. And then, we've incorporated these large planting beds all along the outside of the playground, as well as some within this 5 to 12 playground area for new trees as well.
Ma'am, you've been patient. Please tell us your name and address.
Marjorie Cavalier, Red Bank resident on the west side, 1 Ridge Avenue. And I'm also the vice chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. So I'm speaking to that as well as a resident, and I will be coming up for the next presentation as well. I just have 3 quick questions. Playground, fencing around any of the areas, especially the 5 and under section?
Yes, fencing is proposed along all of the areas except for obviously the entrances to the park. That's also a requirement of the Green Acres grant that the borough had applied for, is to have fencing throughout the entire area.
So separating the areas.
Yes, yep, correct. I mean, it's this dashed line here is shown. And yeah, it goes along the entire area except for, an entrance here, and then the entrance to the little kid playground.
Okay, and my second question is, will the area be able to support if the Philharmonic comes back to town?
Yes.
So where will the viewing be affected? Because right now it was all through. So now it seems like.
I'm not too familiar with the event, to be honest, but
While we all enjoyed sitting on the hill for that, I would guess that it would be more than likely that might end up on the new green space created where the parking was, where there isn't a nice hill to sit, but there's plenty of green space. That's just my guess.
Okay.
Because it doesn't look to me like there's the kind of room we used to have for that stage with the new playground there.
Okay, my final question is, the town just paid recently in 2022 to replace a historic marker in the area. And can you tell me where, is it gonna stay where it is, or is it gonna be placed somewhere else on your diagram?
the historic marker, is that in reference to the Liberty Tree that's there, or? I know that there's a memorial sign that we had discussed preserving. If I'm seeing this correctly, that area wouldn't be disturbed at all, and we would
As you come
certainly.
down Wharf Avenue,
Mhm.
it's right there, because you were talking about relocating the, welcome to Marine Park to some other area.
Yes, yeah, I'll have to double check the exact location of that, I believe.
everybody
it's
know what I'm
more
talking
in
about?
this
Is that,
area.
is that the one that references Mrs. White?
No.
Not, it's not that one. I'll admit I don't exactly know where that is. But if you can follow up on that, Mike, and let us know, we'd
I think
appreciate
looking
that.
at that, it might be directly in front of this tree to remain here, which is actually right along our walkway. It might work well, but we'll definitely look to preserve that. I know that there's a Liberty tree there that we're going to preserve, the flagpole that's existing there. And Yeah, we'll work with the borough
Thank you.
to preserve all those existing features.
Suzanne?
Suzanne Viscomi, West Side. I am not speaking on behalf of the library board or the school board. We're talking about the kids a lot, but what about passive activity for the adults? Like maybe, you know how some parks have, you can push up here and then a little station can do pull-ups here and a little station, you can do something else throughout the park. Is sure adults at like the park too. I didn't see anything with bike racks around. Also, I've been to the park a lot with the events too, but the bathroom area has some hedges there and whatnot, but honestly, I see a lot of people smoking there. So are we pulling down the hedges, we get more access, because people in the hospital don't go to the park, use it as a smoke, obviously you don't want to smoke at the park. So I was wondering if there's better access there, you can hide behind the hedge, to eliminate something so.
I'd like to comment on the smoking. Most of the smokers that I've seen there are hospital employees because the hospital doesn't allow smoking on their campus, so they come over to our park, where, by the way, you're not allowed to smoke. And I would encourage the mayor and council, as I have some of them here, to reach out to the hospital on behalf of the town to tell them to find another place to smoke.
How about give tickets and enforcement?
That would be fantastic. Either that or I'm gonna get a giant super soaker and ride through there and take care of those people myself. But I agree with you. I've seen the smokers. The majority of them are in scrubs. They're coming down the hill from the hospital to smoke. So I would like to certainly see that taken care of as well.
And then you also mentioned that there will be some parking when you go down the hill, for all 4 spots. How many handicap spots are gonna be down there?
So I'll touch on each. We have a total of 6 spaces posed at the bottom, 2 of them being handicap stalls. As for bike racks, I don't have them specifically called out on this plan, but it is something that we will obviously add, as biking is very popular in Red Bank, and we feel a lot of people will be coming there. The exercise stations isn't something that the borough discussed, certainly something I could discuss with them. If it's something they wanted to add possibly along the maintenance roadway, but in terms of adult recreation, we do have that passive area. And one area I didn't mention was next to this playground here. We actually have bocce courts and cornhole proposed as well. That's a bit of a adult game area.
That's good. I mean, I was still gonna try to fight for a dog park, but I didn't see anything even in the rendition on the west side that was allowed out to residents. Thank you.
Yeah. Please give us your name and address.
Kathy Cole Morgan, 67 Oakwood Street. I'm not complaining about the park or anything, but you mentioned Mrs. White. My brothers and I fought, well, I went through a whole thing trying to get something named for Catherine Elkis White. And we had it in Marine Park. I'm wondering, is there still gonna be something down here named for her?
That's in
I don't know
that.
who she is. She was the only female mayor this town ever had.
An ambassador to where?
Denmark.
Denmark, thank you. I didn't.
I actually reached out, I think I'm up here, sorry.
Okay, all right.
I actually reached out and got a hold of her kids, I believe, on Facebook and started that conversation of honoring her somehow. We hadn't decided on exactly how we were gonna do it, but yes, that is gonna happen.
Okay, so I know the original thing, besides with Flag and Marine Park, they were just gonna name the benches across from the Count Basie Theater for her.
We gotta go bigger than that.
Yeah, the thing was everything was being named, like the train station for Daniel Hurd and all that. There was nothing named for a female
Yes.
until my brothers and I went through.
I also had to stop saying I was the first Jewish mayor once I found out that she was the first Jewish.
The only female mayor.
Yes. Yes.
Michael, that's her recognition right now as it exists is that tiny island with the sign that should come down the hill.
Yes.
You're not impacting that, are you?
No, we're not impacting that. Actually, this was discussed with the deputy mayor, and we're looking to improve that and make it a better memorial. We have it's
I do see it on your plan.
Yeah, there's a line right here within that island. That's the memorial sign. It's part of the project.
Something's gonna stay there.
Yes, of course.
think Mary Ellen's coming.
So 95 Hudson Avenue, my name is Mary Ellen Mess. Just a couple of questions. Nobody mentioned sledding, and finding a good sled hill is really difficult in this town. So.
Tower Hill.
Tower Hill.
Tower Hill.
Tower Hill.
Tower Hill.
Well, I know Tower Hill, but this is another favorite here, and so it sounds like that's gonna be eliminated by all these other.
I mean, there is gonna be the hill at this portion. I'm not sure, I haven't seen the kids doing it. I would think getting close, like, it's pretty steep right now. I don't know how much of this area is used because of the water there. I could be wrong, but this area would remain, and then there's Tower Hill, I think, behind the library, there's, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
behind the
there's right there in
library.
the library. I think it's better on.
I don't think I've ever
There's
seen
also a lot
anybody
of
sled.
obstacles at the library. The fishing pier and the boat mooring will remain.
Yes, yes,
All of this is considered green acres.
yes.
So that means, the parking lot really is designated for those people who are using the park, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Because right now, I believe that people from the hospital are allowed to park in the park, and I think that has been a problem and will continue to be a problem, especially if you're gonna have this very attractive, playground for children.
I'd have to confirm the exact parcels and which ones are included on the Rossi map.
Okay. Is there any plan to camouflage the pumping station? I mean, it looks like a monument. It's lit up at night. It's got a flag flying on it. And it's kind of not very appealing.
So, I mean, the new parking lot was constructed right against it. There's not much space to provide screening here. But this whole area, this is a seating wall here, and this whole area behind is a proposed planting garden. That's gonna have, trees, shrubs, so when you're in this area, if you turn around, you're not gonna see the big ugly.
So the pumping station is behind the seating wall. You're not gonna be sitting on the wall looking at the pumping station.
No, you'd be sitting on the wall with the garden behind you, looking at the wall.
Okay. Fourth Avenue, is there room down at the bottom there for the cars to turn around when people head down there inadvertently and they need to get out again?
Yes, yep, so that central triangular island is gonna remain, and then I don't have the dimension off the top of my head, but this is at least 40 feet wide here, for plenty of room to turn around.
I would like you to reconsider the location of the gazebo. Because right now it's on the western end of the lawn area. And if that's intended as an event space with concerts that might be the performances on the gazebo, you know, that faces the setting sun, and we have the same issue in Riverside Gardens Park at certain times of the evening. The sun is like directly in your face, so I'm not sure if maybe it should be facing the other on the other side so that you're not looking into the sun, but you know, that's something for consideration.
Yeah, it's something we'll consider. There's also the option of doing like a backdrop behind it as well.
Is
But
there
it's a good point.
any plan to spruce up the interior of the restrooms?
Yes, and that's actually part of the Green Acres application would be
That's great, because they look like prison cells now with those stainless steel toilets. And my one pet peeve, and I think this is part of code. When you sit on the benches there, your view of the river is completely obstructed by the railing. And if you sit there in the evening, the current lighting has been blinding and completely ruining your night vision. So if you go down there to gaze across the river in the evening, you're sitting next to the park with the headlights on. So what's the plan for lighting here?
lighting, it would be complete new lighting design. We're thinking kind of low level bollard lights throughout the walkways and we're working with our landscape architecture group to ensure that light's kind of thrown away. So that's definitely something that's being taken into
And down
consideration.
on the paths, I mean, the idea of the light should be so that it illuminates the walkway and not, creating all this ambient light so that you can't really enjoy the park. That's-
Agreed, yeah, we don't want anything too bright here. We do want to obviously deter vandalism and stuff, but I will note, security camera system is proposed as well for the park.
Well, it looks like a beautiful design, very ambitious. I just hope that the borough can maintain it and also enforce the regulations as people have spoken about the smoking and also the parking. Because I really think the parking needs to be limited to those people who are actually using the park and should not be infringed upon by the commercial district, the condos that loom above the boat club, or the hospital. So thank you very much. I appreciate your.
Thank you, appreciate your.
Your name and address for this, please.
Brenda Hill, 64 McLaren. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I just had a few questions. The first one, real quick, are you planning, is there going to be an AED in this site at all?
There's not one currently in the plan. Is there not one at the park currently?
I think so, and I really would like to encourage this board and our council as well, because AEDs really save lives. It's easy, they're easy to use, the instructions are very clear, and really could make a difference between somebody having a coronary event and so I would just suggest that we should look at that in this and all public spaces where we can.
I agree.
Okay. Then I wanted to ask you, I appreciate that you said something about ways to mitigate water encroachment and other things that could happen down at that, given that we're on the river. But I mean, Sandy was how many years ago, but we know that we're gonna get another one. Are there any other things that you have incorporated or you can incorporate that would protect the investment that we're doing in this park?
Yeah, of course. Honestly, the main flood mitigation measure is those stormwater check valves. I mean, I've been down there for the full moon and the water just creeps right up the pipes and comes out the drains and it floods that area. Unfortunately, we can't design for Superstorm Sandy without, building a flood wall around the whole park. But all of the improvements within the flood zone would be designed in accordance with the flood hazard area rules. DEP has reviewed this plan as part of the Coastal Area Review Act, as well as the flood hazard area rules. So our gazebo is going to be designed, with the proper footings and anti-flotation materials, and the playground equipment as well is going to have, the footings there. The playground manufacturer Compan has had several playgrounds installed in Florida in areas like this that have actually seen hurricanes and held up very well.
I also wanted to ask about zip lines. At some point, I heard that this incorporated zip lines, is that true?
Yes.
They're still there?
Yes, this is this shown here is a two-person zip line side by side.
Adults, children, who is it for?
It can hold adults as well.
What's the weight limit on those zip lines?
I don't have the exact number. I was told that.
I'm gonna let you know as soon as they're up. I'll let you know.
I'd like to suggest that zip lines don't seem to me to be compatible with the purpose of this park, and the liability must be enormous.
It can't be any worse than monkey bars. I mean, I fell, as a kid, I fell off of everything that was possible to fall off of. And, you know, I would like to think that the mayor and council, whoever their insurance company is, has thought about this plan. And.
Oh, so it's been approved by.
Well, no, I mean, and maybe the engineer did it or not, but all of it is a lawsuit waiting to happen today.
Sure.
And hopefully at some point that will be taken into account. I love the idea of the zip lines. The first thing I thought of was falling and breaking my neck, which I'm gonna try not to do when I zip line down this thing. But I see your point, but these are playground designers who do this. So I'm gonna guess that it's not the end of the world from a liability standpoint, or somebody would say no more zip lines. But I would love to say now in front of the mayor and some council members that that's something we should definitely look at from an insurance standpoint, that we're not gonna get killed on liability insurance for this park because it's got a zip line.
And nobody gets killed. How far off the ground would these zip lines be?
It's.
I'm only 5'10", so really, you don't have to put them too high up.
It's not like a typical like zip line, like I see it like adventure parks that go across. It's essentially ground level with
There you go.
That's not gonna work.
it's just kind of like lift up. It's.
Oh, so we're just talking.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
I
a foot or
figured-
two off the ground.
I did too.
Zip line.
No, it's I believe it was.
No, it's no fun at all. It's not the Amazon rainforest.
You can see it slightly here in the renderings, but this is essentially it. It's similar to a setup like a swing would be, and then you have the two. And yes, essentially, and then it goes across. And that's been specifically designed kind of at the corner of the park, away from all the other improvements because of the potential issue of people, you know, kids are kids, they want to run around. And yes, I had nightmares of a kid running into the middle of this thing while someone's on it, and that's kind of why we.
It's gonna happen anyway, guaranteed.
We've specifically designed it to hopefully avoid that incident.
I'll try not to hit a kid.
Man the zip line all the time? Is there gotta be a person there taking care of it?
No, it's can be.
Just put it on and-
That'll be for the parasailing, Lou. We're gonna have somebody there for the.
It's not an attendant or.
So
anything.
kids just go up and go on the zip line and zip back and forth?
Yeah.
Can you provide like is there a reference for
It's-
this or?
If you look on the screen behind you, we think that's a zip line.
The kid on this,
This the kid on the over the blue.
Yes,
some adults.
the playground manufacturer, and he's big guy, has assured me that he's wrote on them and he looks.
Okay, all right, I'll cross my fingers on the zip line. One last question. You mentioned, I think, 100 trees and many other plantings that are part of this project. How many trees are we losing though, just the total number?
So there's a total of 56 existing trees in the park. 19 of those would be removed. 7 of them were recommended for removal by our licensed tree expert, who went out and did a tree assessment, many of those in the green space. So you have 54 total, 19 being removed, with 29 new shade trees, 28 new ornamental trees, and then hundreds of shrubs, perennials, and like ornamental grasses throughout the small planting beds and stuff where trees can't fit.
Because I do lament losing any trees that, we don't absolutely have to because they're old or sick or whatever, but, so that is a shame. I understand progress, but, I'm sorry to see those trees fall. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public have any questions or comments?
Steve Ansell, 39 Branch Avenue. I think you mentioned that there is going to be a kayak and a jet ski launch.
Yes.
Just in terms of, I used to be a jet skier, I'm not anymore, but I might take it up again now. Is there going to be room for, obviously, if you're towing a jet ski, there's a trailer. And I'm assuming that there's like half a dozen parking spaces down by the waterfront there. are they gonna be big enough to incorporate a trailer?
They're standard size parking stalls right now, but there is kind of a side pulling zone, perhaps, the borough would consider making that a loading zone of some sort.
Right.
And it is worth noting the waterfront improvements do require Army Corps of Engineer approval. So we're currently in there. We had to get the DEP permit before we can go before that. So those improvements may, depending on how soon we get that permit, may be almost an additional phase. But yes, that is incorporated within the horseshoe route.
Right, okay. Yeah, I guess the other question, you probably don't know this, just in terms of permits to be able to launch a craft on the river. Is that something that is going to be required by the town? I'm assuming that, I guess normally it is, but do you know whether it's going to be part of the reason I ask is that, you know, once you put something like this in, lots of people come in from all over different parts of you know, the local area. I'm just sort of thinking that if it's something for Redbank residents, maybe.
I'm thinking for retirement income, I might just stand down there and with a little thing, a change maker or something, get some money out of people. I'm getting nudges of no from several people that there is not a permit necessary to launch a jet ski. Although if we can make some money at it, we should think about it.
I'm already paying for a permit at Shrewsbury River, so I could appreciate not having to pay again, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else in the public with any questions or comments? Sir, come on up.
JNG 165 Spring Street. Okay, I'm a daily visitor to the park. And you were aware of the condos, correct?
Yes.
$1 million condos, there's that access road. To the
Wish we were $1 million.
Above and whatnot. Now, are you aware of the broken up existing drainage for storm flow, overflow?
You're talking about Boat Club Court?
Yes, I am,
You're talking about Boat Club Court?
Yeah, these poor folks, I'm not a resident of them, obviously, but.
And none of them are poor either.
No, it's not my ballpark. Either way though, that drainage has to be replaced, because already on the $1 million condos, the whole top layer has been eroded. And I think we are set up for an epic flood. Because I don't know if all the drainage has been designed to go into the river, but we're gonna reach a point where the water from the river is gonna come back.
yes.
Usually all goes into the boat club.
Yes, I've seen that.
That's usually where it all ends up.
Times.
No, that's been on our radar and not part of this project, but it's actually incorporated into the borough's 2025 road program. That actually just had a bid opening yesterday, so that should be fixed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that would really be great. You know, and again, playground and whatnot, that's fine. I'm just concerned though, as a Red Bank resident of a flood getting ready to happen with that confluence of the river and the drainage. And actually, just this morning, I saw piping being brought in. And, so I think they're making great progress. But again, flood mitigation has to take a priority here beyond all aesthetics and whatnot.
Yeah, of course, this project is considered a major development and has been designed in accordance with all the NJDEP standards for. Just received that approval today. So yeah, everything's been designed that way, and like the stormwater check valves, we think are really gonna help. Again, can't design for storm sanity,
I
but
understand that.
yes.
Because you know that single bench there is, you can't really use it, the one by the, rescue boat. The bench facing that way. That's under a constant, puddle of water.
Yes, I've seen
So
that.
I think that's coming from below. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I've witnessed it myself. High tide,
Yes.
it comes right up the outfall pipe and then up to the grate. I actually saw a a jellyfish swimming in the area
Yes,
just north
there
of
are
the pump
creatures.
station. Before the water had receded and then went away, so the stormwater check valves are gonna help mitigate
Okay,
that.
good, good. And for the governor, Allendale, it's in Red Bank, previous town. Those condos, I don't know who designed them, the flood mitigation and whatnot, but the whole top layer has already worn away.
Top layer where?
Excuse me?
Where, behind them or in front of them?
Basically, they're right in front of them, there's that steep embankment.
Yeah.
Maybe 5-6 layers of flood prevention have been put in place. I've watched over the last 2 years. And over the last year that it has been completed, the top layer is already just about sheared off.
I will mention that to our engineer to take a look at that, because they undoubtedly, the developer, I'm sure, still has the bond in place for those items.
Keep them bonded, yes, because it's gonna be a problem. And, you know, it's great, whatnot, the park redevelopment, but my concern though, as a resident of Red Bank, is for flood mitigation, drainage.
Well, it's pretty much here in the school. So we've covered both of the Marine Park and River Street School are pretty much our biggest flood areas in Red Bank.
Right. Okay, well, as long as we're on the same page and whatnot, but just, we have to keep that into consideration. And beyond that, just for the borough engineers or whatever, I would keep that bond on the developer of those condominiums. It's happening, the erosion. Okay.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public have any comments or questions regarding this?
Just one more question.
Shoot.
How much of the green surfacing area that's shown in the renderings is grass and how much is turf?
Here, so all of this, get the other one, it has better shading.
Is it mainly just the playground area? Is
Yes.
turf? Okay.
That's correct,
Yeah.
so this, all of this area here is just open grass space, open grass with the hammocks and trees proposed there, and then it's really just this dark shading here that's the playground surface.
Okay.
Did you say there were hammocks?
Yes.
Is there a weight limit on those?
I
would love a hammock.
The exact number, but those are also designed for adults.
Be prepared.
Question on those playground surfaces, are they permeable?
Per DEP, they are not, and we've actually designed the site to include that as impervious area, making the design of everything harder. But the synthetic turf material we feel is, it's basically, I mean, it has the fibers within it to allow water to flow through, and then there's a stone bed on, well, a safety pad first, and then the stone pad. It's able to drain through those very easily. DEP's concern is that it's compacted stone. And per DEP, they don't think that water can flow through there. I tend to disagree, to be honest with you, but this was considered an impervious surface per DEP. So everything else had to kind of make up for that.
Thank you.
Well,
Has there been a discussion about adding Wi-Fi to that park?
it's not been a discussion of my knowledge.
That'd be cool.
And so those steep slope areas in the playground are turf, where we have steep transitions. Is there any concern with that being a turf surface on a steep slope?
No, we've specifically designed that. Actually, the bottom portion, we recently have reviewed and changed to a poured in place rubber, but the rest of it would be turf, and we find that that's actually better for the slope itself.
Okay.
Better for sledding too.
Yeah, right. Would be.
It's about maintenance. The sail, what do you call them? The shade sails and the turf and everything. How, and actually, all the new plantings, the trees. From the experience I've had, like in the parking lot, the trees died the first year. They haven't been replaced yet. And this is enormous amount of maintenance. How long does this turf last where you have to replace it?
To double check the numbers, but it's 10+ years. That the turf would last, and then from there, it's really just replacement of the actual carpet of the turf, whereas the sub-base material, you wouldn't, that would remain in place. You might have to fill in small areas, but it's actually a cheap maintenance. As for the plantings, the new trees that were installed and are dead, those are bonded and will be replaced. And all of the new plantings, we incorporated a drip irrigation system. That was one of the things we had worked with the Shade Tree Committee on. That's gonna water all of the new plantings, ensure that they're able to survive, as well as allow us to plant some larger trees.
About the ones in the parking lot, where you put the drip there too?
Yeah, that's something that we can look into. It may be difficult within the center island, just because we wouldn't want to rip up the brand new porous asphalt. But the ones in the islands, we can look into incorporating that.
Do you mean the old parking lot?
No, the new parking lot, the trees died that they planted already, yeah.
Yes.
Lou's gonna be out there checking this every day. So just so you know.
Every other day.
Every other day, he's gonna be out there.
Yeah, I was made aware of the issue with this trees. We reminded the contractor of their responsibility to maintain them, and should they die, that they would have to be replaced.
I think that the ones that are replaced, we don't want them to die again, so maybe we could have something that irrigates them too.
Yeah, so one of the recommendations we originally had was for the contractor to install gator bags. It's the bags that go around the tree and are filled with water and, slowly release the water to water them. We had suggested that to the contractor before they died. They didn't take that route, so we'll be required.
Is it up to the contractor to decide what he wants to do, or is it up to us?
Well, he's gotta keep replacing them.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's.
Is he replacing them again and again? But in the meantime, we don't have we don't have anything looking, it looks dead trees.
Yes, agree. I mean, once this project is complete, they would be released, and then they would provide a 2-year maintenance bond. So those trees would be covered up to 2 years. But with the new plantings, we would be requiring them to install irrigation for those to ensure that they.
So how about general maintenance? Do you have any idea how much it'll cost every year to fix things, maintain things, improve things?
We don't have a specific number on hand, but DPW has been involved in the process, and certain selections were made due to the maintenance aspect of some of these features, and that's something that we're going to work with DPW to maintain.
And the turf, I think the Environmental Commission brought up the thought that little pieces break off and fall and pollute the water. So what do you know about that?
I can't speak to the actual, the brass, the blades themselves. I feel that those are pretty secure to the carpet. One of the concerns that they brought up was the infill material, which is typically you would see on a sports field, is that rubber, the black rubber. That's not what we're using here. We're using an environmental friendly sand infill that's actually weighted as well. So in the event of a flood, it wouldn't even be picked up to then brought into the river. That's something that we looked into.
Lou's gonna be down there keeping an eye on that too. Sir, please give us your name and address.
Lee Sanderson, 95. Two questions regarding performance and safety. What is the diameter of it? How large is it? And are you providing some kind of protection from sun?
The specific dimensions of this gazebo have not been worked out. That's one of the finer details that we'll be working out in the coming months with the borough. We had discussed potential, the idea of what they want it to look like, but specific dimensions has not been decided on. And I know that another member of the public had brought up the concern of the sun behind it, so that's something that we may look into, is, having a back portion of this, so that it's.
That citizen will.
Oh.
And the reason I say that is because I'm a professional musician. I have performed in the parks in the heat of the summer. It's god awful.
Yeah, so
And we do have world-class performers coming to this town. And they need to have that kind of world-class performance. So I could keep that in mind.
Yeah, there's definitely something that we can, kind of provide the screen in the back, whether it's a separate wall or actually a portion of the gazebo. I'm sure it would help with the acoustics, so I defer to you on that.
Thank you.
Lee representing. Thanks.
So I'm not gonna ask if anyone else has any other comments or questions, because guess what? It turns out we don't even have to take comments and questions for stuff like this. We do it just because I enjoy it. So, thank you all very much. Michael, thank you very much. We are in the same situation as we were with the school, to recommend this plan, move forward to the council for their review.
I just wanted to say
One
something.
more.
It was gonna be a nice ending, but you,
What are you saying? I ruined it?
yes.
Oh.
What I was going to say was that about 2 weeks ago, I had a friend visiting who is not capable of walking, and she misses going down to Marine Park. And so I said, well, I think that if we go down to the new parking lot, which everybody hated, but it's wonderful, you can just walk out of the car and walk right up to the water. And she was thrilled, and it made her day. And I thank you for that, and I thank the town for that, because now she's going to be able to go down with her family and sit and enjoy the water again. She couldn't do that for many years because she couldn't walk the hills. But that parking lot, take the handicap spaces are right down, flat on the ground. Thank you. That's all.
I thought me telling people we didn't have to listen to them for this. But I will make
The principal, I'm the teacher.
make a motion to recommend this plan from a consistency standpoint to the mayor and council. Mr. Attorney, do I need to say anything else?
It's not consistency. It's capital improvement. So exactly the same way as you did the school. It's just a recommendation that you're okay with the plan. Or if you have recommendations, you can do it. You can include that in it. If you are against it, you can say no.
I make a motion that the planning board encourage this plan to the mayor and council, and I'd like to see the specs on the zip line and the other thing, so that I can go down there and have a good time. And I also recommend, as part of my motion, that the position of the sun in the afternoons there for performances and for people using the large grassy area be taken into account. It is a tremendous amount of sun in the afternoon, and it is hostile down there as the sun sets. There's no doubt about that. We have a second to my motion.
Second.
Can we do it all in favor?
No, do roll. Sorry.
Mayor Portman,
Yes.
Christina Bonatakis,
Yes.
Sammy Kuso.
Yes.
Lou Demento,
Could I put in a recommendation that they guarantee that the trees on the new parking lot are watered? If not by
Happy to add that to my motion.
irrigation or bags, but to make that as a requirement?
I'd be happy to add that to my motion.
okay.
Yes.
Barbara Boas,
Yes.
Wilson Bibi,
Yes.
Itzel Hernandez,
Yes, absolutely.
and Brian Carnigan.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, now for the main event. A 10-minute bathroom break, and I mean 10 minutes, like I'm not kidding, 10 minutes. It's 8:35. Okay, let's do a roll call as the planning board is back to order. After only a 10-minute break, I'm happy to say. It's 8:45, let's do a roll call. Sean.
Mayor Portman,
Here.
Christina Bonatakis. Here. Sammy Kuso,
Here.
Lou Demento,
Here.
Barbara Boas,
She'll be back in a moment.
Wilson Bibi,
Here.
Itzel Hernandez,
Here.
and Frederick Stone,
Here.
and Brian Bernigan.
Here.
Okay, as I mentioned before, this is the main event. And we are going to hear about the train station redevelopment plan, not the actual plan from the builder for the development. I just want everyone to be clear, this is the first of probably many meetings regarding the train station area. This is not the specific site plan. That will be coming at some point later from the applicant. This is from our planner that we hired to help us with this. And this is the redevelopment plan that the planning board will be either recommending or not recommending to the mayor and council for their consideration. So Susan Favate, welcome.
Let's just note for the record that Ms. Boats has returned to the bench.
Yes.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you to the board and members of the public. I know it's been a bit to get here, and thanks for all your patience tonight.
Hold the mic real close, Susan.
I always worried it's too loud. Let me know.
Well, that we've never said that ever to anyone. Did I really?
So I have about 20 slides tonight. I know there are members of the public who want to speak, and there'll certainly be opportunity for that. I want to take the board and the public through the redevelopment plan. The plan is about 40 pages. I know there are appendices. They're all kind of supporting documentation, the background studies, the summaries of public workshops, all the resolutions that we need to provide as part of the plan. But the plan itself is a solid 40 pages. There's a lot in it, so I want to spend the time tonight to take everybody through it. Give you a sense a little bit of how we got here, this introduction, and then really take you through the main plan, the districts that are covered in this redevelopment plan, the uses, the bulk standards, and all the other standards, design standards in particular, the offsite improvements that are contemplated as part of this plan, and then the chairman touched on a little bit about what happens next and how this is implemented. It's a multi-step process. So just by way of background, I think most folks know, but it's always good to just have a recap, refresher. Sorry. Next slide, please. On the statutory basis for redevelopment, it is from the New Jersey Local Redevelopment and Housing Law, which really creates a set of tools that municipalities can use to plan and to implement revitalization in certain areas. It can allow for eminent domain, but in this case, it absolutely does not. And that is something that the Borough Council established early on. And in fact, the ability to do redevelopment without eminent domain is a fairly new change in the last 10 or so years in the state law. And as a result, you are seeing redevelopment used more throughout the state. You're seeing it in suburban communities, small towns, communities that previously maybe wouldn't have thought about the redevelopment tool. But now that eminent domain can be off the table, it's a little bit more refined tool that they can use. So once a redevelopment plan is designated and adopted, it basically establishes standards for zoning, standards for development in the area, and it can supersede the underlying zoning. But unlike traditional zoning, it can get a lot more detailed. Many of you know, on the planning board and from the public as well, perhaps, that zoning is a pretty blunt tool in New Jersey, and they're limited. Municipalities are limited as to how detailed they can be in terms of design, and other types of standards, architecture. But redevelopment, you can use those tools. You can get very specific on the requirements that you would like to see in certain areas. So that's a real benefit of the tool. And you can get specific on amenities, community amenities, and how the standards will be upheld in terms of maintenance and all of those details. So it is a really nice aspect of redevelopment. This process is subject to state statute, and is a whole process that we have undergone, and I'll touch on the next slide, but it requires meeting specific criteria as set out by the state statute. And so that is really the first step in the process. Next slide. I've touched on this in previous engagement efforts for this project, but this area is not new in terms of planning. The train station area, the borough has been looking at it for a long, long time. And many of your master plans and examination reports for going back decades, really trying to make something happen here around the train station in terms of transport and development, density that can support activity and build on the asset of your train station. The 2023 master plan in particular spent a lot of time on this area and looked closely at it as part of the overall function of the borough in terms of, if you look at this image on the right, really seeing the train station area as kind of a linchpin, connecting point between your downtown core and the Shrewsbury Avenue corridor on the west side. But this is a key area and an opportunity through thoughtful redevelopment and revitalization to knit those two areas together for the mutual benefit of both. There were a number of recommendations that were specific in the master plan on this area. One was restarting the transit village designation process, which is separate from this process. It's not this board purview, but it's sort of related in the TOD type realm. Another recommendation was to replace the train station zoning with a more targeted TOD zoning district that really laid out standards for development that might actually happen, because the train station district that had been in place really had not generated that type of development interest or viability. And then the last recommendation was specific on looking at redevelopment as a tool to facilitate that transit-oriented development, and including working with New Jersey Transit's designated developer, who is also a major property in the area. So all of those create the framework for the redevelopment process. Next slide. Just to recap of kind of how we got here. Back in December 2023, the governing body authorized the planning board to do a preliminary investigation of this area to determine if it met the criteria for redevelopment. We initiated that process, that study, in January of 2024. Took a couple months, came back to you, the board, presented that study, and you made a recommendation to Borough Council to designate those areas that they did meet the criteria for designation as redevelopment. And the council made that action in April of last year. Got a little bit wrinkled because there were additional 6 properties as we got into the planning process. And these 6 properties were owned by New Jersey Transit. It became apparent that they had not been included from the get-go, but they should have been. So another study was initiated to look at those, bringing those into the overall redevelopment area. Did those additional properties meet the criteria? This board recommended that they did. The council agreed and found that that they did meet the criteria, and added those 6 properties to the designated area just in February. So all of that has sort of brought us to where we are now. The sort of conclusion of the planning aspect, the planning portion of this phase, the plan that you have before you tonight. Potentially, if this board makes a recommendation, a positive recommendation to Borough Council, the next step would be for council to adopt this redevelopment plan potentially next month. That's obviously dependent on the outcome of tonight and any future meetings. So that is the kind of overall timeline in terms of the redevelopment portion of the process and how we got here. Next slide. The process has also included engagement with the public. There were 2 public workshops held last year, both well attended, to get feedback on first the vision for this plan, what the community really wanted to see, what they didn't want to see, and then a little bit later toward the end of the year, looking at some of the initial concepts by the developer in this case, and seeing what's sort of on the table and getting some feedback on that. Those were very helpful. The input that we got at those workshops directly fed into this redevelopment plan in terms of the uses that people wanted to see, design standards that people wanted to see, what they wanted the buildings to look like, what they'd like to see in public spaces. So all of that really came through in the redevelopment plan, as well as the goals for the plan overall. The process has also involved a lot of coordination with borough officials, elected officials, and staff. New Jersey Transit has been an active participant in this process. They obviously are a major property owner, and they also want this to continue to be a great train station, and that is really first and foremost. The function and the operation of this train station can't be diminished in any way. And then Denholtz is also, as the New Jersey Transit designated developer and a major property owner in the study area, has been involved in this process, as is typical for a redevelopment plan like this. It really is a public-private partnership. It's negotiation. Not everybody gets everything they want, but you come up with a plan that hopefully everybody can agree on. Consensus is really the best for the borough. And it also incorporates, we hope this plan, the draft plan, best practices for redevelopment that we're looking at throughout the state. There's a lot of work being undertaken on TOD and the redevelopment tool in particular, but there's a lot of standards, there's a lot of commonalities that we can look at. There's a lot that you can pull from urban design that's happening in the state and the region. So really learning from other people's experiences and learning from other people's mistakes, looking around at apartment buildings that are coming up, and how do we avoid looking quite like that? What can we do in terms of a design standard to make sure that we get something a little bit higher quality? So that is all factored into this planning as well. So slide, planning context, I think you all know where it is, I hope. Just on the aerial on the left, you see that the train station itself is the centerpiece of this study area, but if you see on the image of on the right, the entire area is shown in blue. It's a funky state because it includes the rail yard and some of the actual rail right of way as well. But that is an area that entire area was studied for the designation and it was brought into the designation of the redevelopment. So in terms of the plan itself, it is, as I said, the meat of that plan is 40 pages. Starts out describing the area itself, a little bit of the background process, the redevelopment process as a whole, but also how the borough came to this point. There are a set of goals that are established specifically for this redevelopment plan. And we have to look at how this plan interacts with the master plan as well as other local planning objectives and planning documents. And then we get into what essentially is the zoning that goes into this redevelopment plan. The sub-districts and how those come into play, and I'll talk about those. A whole host of standards, whether it's area, height, bulk, general planning standards, and then all of these design criteria, design standards that are part of these. We do have a number of statutory elements that we have to look at in terms of plan consistency with all of your neighboring communities. So anybody that abuts Red Bank, we need to look at how this plan is consistent with their master plans. There's a whole host of sort of implementation pieces that we telegraphed. And I'll talk about those at the end, basically saying everything that this plan will need to be implemented and next steps on that. We do have to kind of give a summary of how we're meeting all of the different statutory requirements. And then there is a set of definitions. There are basically zoning definitions. And in some cases, they supersede the zoning definitions that are in the rest of your code. But in others, they're just a lot more tailored, specific to this train station redevelopment plan. So I'm going to dive in and take you through this slide on the goals. And again, these came directly out of the public engagement that was done for this project. The master plan is also a good starting point, but these are a bit more refined and tailored to the train station area in particular. So the first goal is kind of from the master plan as well, but using, as I mentioned early on, using this potential revitalization, future improvements here, including in the public realm and pedestrian improvements, using that to connect your central business district, your central commercial district, and the Shrewsbury Avenue corridor, and really strengthening the identity of both places. So not detracting from either, but really pulling it all together. Second goal deals with supporting multimodal transportation opportunities. This is first and foremost a multimodal hub. It's got train, it's got bus, it's got bicycling, walking, taxi, rideshare. We want all of that to be able to continue in a way that is not the same as now, it is now perhaps enhanced. So that is really first and foremost. Another goal is to promote multifamily housing, both market rate and affordable, at the density that is appropriate for this type of transit-oriented development that really creates that viable development option here. And these are in no particular priority or order, by the way. Next goal is about the public realm. We spent a lot of time in the redevelopment plan talking about this. There's a lot of design standards specifically to the public realm, and by that I mean public plazas, the sidewalks, the streets that will be created in this area, making sure that it's accessible. And by that we mean ADA accessible, but also accessible, open, and welcoming to the entire community. That is community serving and has amenities for residents, for passive recreation, special events, arts and culture, and just gathering spaces. So very important. Another goal is about sustainability. We know that this is an area that is nearly 100% paved, so there's an opportunity to reduce impervious coverage here, increase vegetative cover, improve stormwater management, and lessen the heat island effect that we know is in place today. And then lastly, really using this as an opportunity to introduce and facilitate community-facing uses, community-serving uses that complement rather than compete with your existing business areas. We know that that's very important to Red Bank, and we want to see these as sort of partners and complementary to each other rather than competition. Next slide. Diving right in. So when we get to the nuts and bolts of how we're going to regulate development in this redevelopment area, we really looked at three distinct areas. And most of you can probably see. Everything outlined in pink is in District A, which is basically the train station area itself. Monmouth Street to the north, all the way down to Dr. James Parker Boulevard to the south. This is the land that is generally owned by New Jersey Transit and Denholtz Properties. It's basically the focus of this redevelopment plan. We know that that is where there is a development proposal. this is where most of the standards really are going to apply. But there are other areas that were part of this study area, this redevelopment area, the DPW site being one of them. So that's what you see outlined in green. And that is going to be a focus of a borough effort. The borough is actively working on a separate rehabilitation effort there. Long overdue, but that is something the borough is working on. There's draft plans, I believe, and so that is going to be proceeding parallel and a bit separate from this redevelopment plan. It's not dependent on this redevelopment plan. We're certainly anticipating it, supporting it, but it's something that the borough can proceed with on their own. And then the third district is District C, the Count Basie site. This is the supportive office and some of the other infrastructure for Count Basie. It's not the theater itself, but there's some performance spaces, office spaces, et cetera. And that's outlined in orange. This was included in the redevelopment designation and the study area of the redevelopment plan. There are no imminent plans, development plans known. There's no indication that the property owner is interested in any change. So there are some development standards here, basic standards that cover that district, but they generally are right now maintaining the status quo with the expectation that there won't be any change in the near term on that. If they were to want to come back, they're part of this redevelopment plan. That's an option available to that property owner. It would likely require an amendment to this plan to really facilitate development on that site. So within the general focus of this plan, District A, the train station area, that is further subdivided into what's called the north parcel and the south parcel. So the north parcel is shown in pink, shaded in, and then the south parcel is shown in a blue or teal color. And the reason they're separated is because they're a little bit different in terms of their context. The north parcel is obviously close right at the train station. It's on Monmouth Street. It has a little bit more connection to the commercial core. Kind of lends itself more to true mixed use environment, with a little bit more commercial space. Whereas the south parcel starts to get closer to some of the residential neighborhoods, maybe lends itself more to a residential focus, slightly different scale. So you want to kind of think about different standards that really apply to both of those areas. And then what you see in yellow is the rail yard, which is going to stay basically as is, fenced off as it currently is from the public. That is not going to change. Talk a little bit about some long-term ideas there, but really that portion of the redevelopment area is kind of as is. And anything in the future that might change in that regard in terms of future development, again, would require an amendment to the plan. So I know that it's hard for folks to read, so I probably will read some of this slide. Looking at permitted uses in each of these three districts. District A, again, the train station area has the most uses contemplated, and really the idea here is to allow a broad array of uses. So multifamily, both market rate and affordable, as well as mixed use in that mixed use context. A really broad array of retail, except tobacco shops, personal care, urgent care, banks, as long as they're not drive-through. We actually heard of a workshop, a desire for banks, because there are none on this side of town. Restaurants and food services uses, museums, performance space, art galleries, artisan workshops, really anything related to the arts and cultural space. Breweries, brew pubs, distilleries, bars and lounges, preschools and childcare. That's something we've heard strong interest in from the community. Indoor recreation, so that's really anything in the fitness realm. Obviously traditional gyms, but also classes. Those could be exercise classes or even or leisure-oriented classes. There's a whole host of options there. Co-working space, community nonprofit uses, it's called essential services. Those are defined by the borough and they're allowed in most zones. Retail cannabis, and then public open space and related amenities, and obviously the transit and all the related amenities that go with that. These are principal permitted uses. There are also some accessory uses in the plan, like outdoor dining, that are also contemplated in District A. District B is pretty limited in terms of its permitted uses. Again, this is the DPW site. And so really the uses here are what's there now: government facilities, public utilities, and related infrastructure. District C, that Count Basie back office site, really anything that is currently allowed in the BR2 district, which is its current zoning. So really no change to the permitted uses there. And the BR2 is pretty pretty broad as well. It allows a good mix of residential, but also commercial uses in the area. So in terms of bulk requirements, area height, setback, and density, we're really looking at the north parcel and south parcel here in District A, again, that train station area. So the north parcel, one that is close to Monmouth Street, minimum lot size there is 3.5 acres. There is a limit, a maximum on the ground floor, non-residential space for any one individual tenant of 7,000 square feet. And that's really meant to avoid the huge big box type size uses. We want to make sure that these are a little bit small scale, appropriate for a community like Red Bank. Maximum building coverage of 50%, maximum impervious coverage 85%, building height of 6 stories, 75 feet. There's some setbacks, minimum setbacks along specifically on Monmouth West and Chestnut Streets. And then the maximum residential density essentially equates to 200 units on this north parcel. On the south parcel, which is again, between Leonard and Chestnut, slightly different minimum lot size, 4 acres, slightly smaller, maximum ground floor space for any one tenant is 5,000 square feet. Coverage numbers are the same, bit of a smaller height, again, because it's closer to residential neighborhoods, it's starting to kind of scale down a bit. So 5 stories and 60 feet there, a little bit more generous setbacks on Chestnut, Herbert, and Leonard Streets, but the same basic density. I think the vision here on the south parcel is that there'll be less commercial space, most likely, or non-residential space. There will be, again, more of a focus building on residential. And I should say that these are all minimums or maximums. It basically just creates the box. In all likelihood, a lot of these maximums will not be met. When you craft a redevelopment plan, you're trying to contemplate and anticipate future development. It's still very conceptual. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in here because nobody wants to come back and have to amend the plan 10 times. So these maximums are truly that, maximums and in a few cases minimums as well. On the DPW site, really there's not a lot of change here. We did suggest a maximum building height of 40 feet, but really everything else would be provided for as part of the borough's upgrade plans. So there's really no specifics on setbacks, density, that kind of thing, because it is going to be a borough property at DPW site. And then on the Count Basie site, really maintaining the existing density area and bulk provisions in the BR2, no changes there. And one reason we did that is because, again, there's no actual development contemplated on that site. We were really loath to impose new density standards and new bulk standards when the site is really not changing. And this is a site that is, kind of adjacent to some residential neighborhoods. It's a very different scale from the train station area. So we would not have wanted to impose anything comparable to the train station area on that property. In terms of parking, long list here, and I'm not going to go through all these ratios, but they're basically reduced parking ratios in the District A train station area. What we did was we started from the train station zoning that currently exists, which already is slightly reduced minimum parking requirements from the rest of the borough. And we went a little bit lower and really each use tailored that. So for example, on the multifamily side, we looked at studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom, different parking minimums per bedroom type. We really went about as low as we felt comfortable going. I know there were some comments, could we go even lower or maybe not even require minimum parking? We really do have a lot of experience, our firm, with TODs that have actually been built in the region, and we've seen what the actual parking demand is. So we really wanted to feel comfortable that borough would not be creating some kind of a parking shortage. We know that people are going to be living here and they're going to be having cars, and so they need to be able to park there. There are some parking standards for the non-residential uses as well, and we'll go through all of that. Again, most of those are fairly similar to the existing borough standards, but usually just a bit lower because it's in recognition that this is at a train station. We do expect that there'd be more walking to and from these uses. And then the other 2 districts, District B and C, no changes to the parking standards. They will continue to rely on the existing borough standards. There are some other parking provisions aside from the minimums that I wanted to talk about. First of all, there is a minimum requirement of 150 spaces that will be dedicated and marked and accessible for commuters and the public. Those may be a combination of on-street, interior streets, as well as in garages. That 150 number is straight from New Jersey Transit. It is what they feel they need in terms of supporting the commuters that currently are there. So we really, needed to maintain that. And then this is different from your current zoning. We actually have parking maximums here too. So really, again, trying to kind of balance the need to provide parking for both residents as well as public and commuters, but not putting more pavement down. We really want to come down on the pavement. So there's a maximum of on-street parking, and this is new streets to be created. So really parking along those sort of north-south streets. Maximum will be 75 spaces on the north parcel and 55 spaces on street on the south parcel. Again, both along those new north-south streets. And those are maximums. I think in all likelihood, we'll come down even lower than those. There is a maximum overall kind of all-in number in terms of the total parking, new parking here of 725 spaces. That's going to cover that 150 meter in public spaces, the 75 and 55 maxes that I just talked about, and really anything else that might be covered. So if they have maxed out on the 75 spaces and 55 spaces on street, they need to provide everything else in a garage. And it's really kind of on the developer to provide the parking that they need. That 725 total does not include the existing Bridge Street commuter lot, right there at the corner of Bridge and Monmouth. That is not changing, or not proposed to change. I think it's about 60 spaces currently. So those will remain available and remain commuter spots. So they're not part of that 725. It also does not include, there's some potential spaces for rail yard employees that may be provided in the south parcel, kind of tucked in behind the building along the railway. So they're not part of that 725. That's going to probably be part of the developer agreement, really between the developer and New Jersey Transit to make sure that they're providing space for those employees. And then lastly, it doesn't include existing garage for the rail development. So that 725 is sort of new spaces, both in garage and in surface. In terms of parking standards for the overall redevelopment area, so this really does also apply to the other two districts. There is provision for flexibility when it comes to site plan review that this board could give some flexibility on parking standards based on shared parking opportunities, and that would be some analysis done by the applicant. There are specific requirements on bike spaces, both indoor and outdoor, and that are provided for commuters as well as residents. And those are in addition to any bike spaces that currently exist. So there'll be a lot more new ones. And then there's also provisions for EV charging spaces, again, that serve both the public and the future residents. And then provisions for loading areas. We know that that has become more and more important in the age of Amazon and getting everything delivered. So loading areas for deliveries, pickup, drop off, and then moving in by residents. So we want to make sure that that's accounted for in future planning. Another piece of this plan that is, as I mentioned earlier on, unique to the redevelopment process is it really does allow you to get into the fine grain on design. So this plan does that, talks about issues like building massing, and specifically design. This is where we talk about breaking up roof lines, breaking up long uninterrupted facades, ways we can do that through design and building articulation. It talks about building materials, and we heard the community loud and clear on red brick. Not that we're forcing buildings to be all red brick, but there is a provision where there's a minimum amount of all the building facades that need to incorporate some type of red brick type material. It doesn't say they all have to be the same brick, but encourage creativity, but obviously recognizing that there is a context here. There's an established vocabulary that Red Bank has. Building frontages, there's a lot of attention paid to basically where the private building meets the public realm. So making sure that that is inviting and sort of seamless with the public realm. Access, circulation, utilities, and mechanicals. We talk a lot about the new streets, what those need to include in terms of minimum sidewalk widths, accessibility. We talk about Monmouth Street, West Street with some detail, and setbacks, looking at potential improvements along those streets. Bearing utilities to the greatest extent practicable, all the development, and then making sure that all the mechanicals, whether they're on rooftops or whether they're on the ground, are fully screened and incorporated as part of that design. There are a number of historic elements in the area now, the most obvious being the train station building itself, but there are a number of other markers, and many are familiar to you and the public as well. And so there's a provision that those stay, whether they stay in place or they are tastefully, thoughtfully relocated elsewhere on the site, they will remain accessible. Signage, landscaping, screening, fencing, lighting, these are all really important. They matter. They matter in how a place feels to people and how it actually is implemented. So things like no internally lit signage, screening, landscaping, requirements of looking at native plants that are part of the Shade Tree Committee's list. Maintenance of those plants that came up earlier tonight. So making sure that the developer is responsible for long-term maintenance of those plants. Programming of public spaces, who's sort of managing those spaces, who's maintaining them. Fencing in terms of height of fencing, but also making sure you don't have these long expanses of fences with blank walls. So thinking about art, thinking about landscape screening, we do have fencing in place. Lighting, there's provisions for dark sky lighting, and really other ways to promote more decorative lighting in this area. And then there's a lot of attention paid to the public space, the plaza area in particular. Again, making sure that that space is green, both from a foliage vegetation standpoint, but also sustainability standpoint, stormwater, making sure that it's inviting and it's clear that it is a public space, truly public space. So that includes the public plaza proposed at the corner of Monmouth and train station area, but also there's a new proposed pedestrian walkway on Oakland Street using the current right of way, and that would be pedestrian only. So we spent a lot of time on that and making sure that it's again, going to be a public space. It's not going to feel private. It's not going to feel like you're trespassing on somebody's apartment building. It's going to have high visibility to the train station, directly to the train station, so that people understand that they can walk right up and access the train station that way. So some clear standards on that public space. And then lastly, a lot of standards on green and sustainable design. So things like LEED equivalent design, pool roofs where you can't do full-on green roofs. So that's an alternative, looking at specifics on the new building construction to make sure that it's energy efficient. It's using all of the tools that are available now in the private sector for energy efficiency. So just some examples on the next slide that are in the plan. So here you see these are just some concepts. And again, these are meant to be illustrative for the standards and the guidelines that are in the plan. So you have Monmouth Street. We know that the borough also has plans to do some upgrades here along Monmouth. There's an opportunity for more trees, obviously, for pedestrian improvements, some slight differences to the roadway, crosswalk improvements. And then on the left, you see that proposed Oakland pedestrian passageway and the proposal that I was just talking about here, keeping it kind of free and clear to the public, good sight lines to the train station itself. There's minimum width to make sure that it's an ample and generous walkway, something that will really be usable by the public. Next slide, we get into some of the building massing items. This is really looking at where you do have long facades, which sometimes is not avoidable. Would prefer to have shorter facades, but sometimes building designs can't lend themselves to that. So there's a lot that you can do in terms of the vertical and the horizontal of the building design to break up those facades, particularly along the roof line. We've seen those new apartment buildings that just have a sort of a constant 100-foot or more long roof line. It just looks like a giant block. So that's what we're trying to avoid here. Break that up, make that more pedestrian scale, more user scale, and the high quality development that I think we're looking for. So these are just some massing illustrations that are part of the plan. And then there's a series beyond the bulk standards, beyond the design standards. There's sort of a grab bag of other standards, other requirements that when it comes to site plan application, any developer would be required to do. They will need to submit building elevation and renderings from all viewpoints. As part of that site plan application, the planning board is authorized to request a materials board. We've seen this in other communities where they actually have to show you colors, the materials. It has to be a physical board that's available, at the municipal building. The public can go look at it. That's a really important way to kind of understand what you're going to be looking at. Stormwater management obviously needs to meet the most stringent requirements with a focus on green infrastructure. Traffic and parking, we know, is a major concern and issue for folks. So this plan does require completion of a traffic and parking study prior to the submission of a site plan application. So that study, the contents of it will be agreed upon with the borough as part of the redeveloper agreement. But it will look specifically at traffic generation, but also analysis of the bus routes and location of bus stops and turning movements, and whether there need to be any improvements made to accommodate any of those changes. There is a minimum set aside. It has to be on site, cannot be put elsewhere, and it cannot be paid in lieu. So there will be affordable housing on this at a minimum of 20%. Public art and murals, we suggesting that they be incorporated throughout. There is a real opportunity here to create a sense of place, create a lot of artistic community that's already here. And then lastly, there are provisions for a construction and phasing plan. This is a major potential development. So the construction of that is likely to be disruptive. And so it needs to be carefully managed and planned for, so that everyone knows what to expect over that lifetime of the construction. There are also a series of off-site improvements that are discussed. This is another benefit of redevelopment, and it does give you the opportunity to get some public amenities and public benefits as part of this development. So this is an area, again, of town that the borough has spent a lot of time planning, and New Jersey Transit has too. We've had a lot of study over the years of bike pedestrian improvements. We know there are issues, there are accident histories here. So there's a lot of opportunities to improve crosswalks, improve sidewalks and bike lanes. So what we've done is we've kind of put together some of those prior planning efforts. The report that you see on the right, which is from 2018, there was also a bike pedestrian plan from 2010. So to the extent that those recommendations remain relevant and are not being undertaken by the borough as part of the Monmouth Street, there's definitely an opportunity, and we've highlighted specific improvements that should be discussed with the developer. And then a long-term plan, which we heard a lot of interest from the public in the workshops, is trying to create greater connectivity north-south. We know that the rail yard and the overall train station area do disrupt the street grid. It kind of is what it is, but there's an opportunity potentially long-term as part of this planning effort to get a connection potentially even as far south as Parker Boulevard. It will be an improvement even just through this proposed development because the rail yard is going to be pushed down a little bit. So the current gate is going to be pushed down to Leonard Street. So the borough is already going to pick up another 2 blocks of pedestrian roadway connection in that area. So already an improvement north-south, but there is an opportunity much longer term. There's obviously security concerns New Jersey Transit has. It's an active rail yard. It will remain an active rail yard. They do not want people walking through it. So it would have to be something along the periphery, gated, walled, protecting that rail yard and the people who are nearby. So that's a long-term plan proposal. It requires coordination with New Jersey Transit, but it is in the plan. A couple other improvements which aren't on the slide, but we talk about West Street. I think most folks know that as part of this plan, there is a proposal to relocate the existing bus stop, which is sort of internal to the site near the train station building itself. Relocate that to West Street. That has been vetted by New Jersey Transit. That is, as we understand, their preferred location for that relocation, but it clearly is a change on West Street. There needs to be some analysis of turning movements and widths to make sure that that's a safe and effective alternative. So there may be some offsite improvements needed there as well. I think this is my last slide, actually. So what happens next? As the chairman introduced your role tonight, and you may not take action tonight, it's really this board's call. There's nothing in this plan, this draft plan, that binds you to any course of action, that binds the borough council to any course of action. It's really you all are in the driver's seat. But if you so choose, at some point, you would make a recommendation to the borough council that this plan should be adopted. And then it's the borough council's decision to adopt the plan. If they did, essentially the standards and the guidelines of this plan become the new zoning for the area. And then there's a whole other process. We kind of ended the planning process, but then we began the implementation process. So then the borough would need to designate a developer. I know that Dan Holtz is currently New Jersey Transit's designated developer, but they're not the borough's designated developer. So that is a step that borough council would need to take to designate, whether it's Dan Holtz or anyone, a redeveloper designation. And as part of that designation, the borough would then craft a redeveloper agreement, highly detailed. We talk a lot about in the plan things that are highlighted for the redeveloper agreement, but you get into details like financial agreements, bonding, very specifics on usage, management, long-term maintenance, things like that. That process would obviously have to involve New Jersey Transit as well, because there's a lot of considerations for maintaining some of the transit access, making sure that everything is up to speed in terms of the actual use of the station. That all needs to be spelled out in the redevelopment agreement, and New Jersey Transit has to be comfortable with that as well. So that is a process that Borough Council would undertake. And when that is completed, then the developer would be free to make an application to the planning board for site plan. Just like any site plan application, you would hear it, there'd be public comment, review. It's not going to be a one-night meeting. I'm sure there'll be multiple meetings on that. But that is where you'll really get into a lot of these details. That's when they'll come in with actual density, actual parking spaces, the actual numbers that are part of that plan. You'll be looking at things like building design and material, as you would with any normal site plan. There's just a lot more to give you rather than typical zoning. And just like with typical zoning, if they don't meet the standards of this plan, they need a variance, either a variance from you or potentially an amendment to the plan. They cannot get a use variance. They cannot get a D variance that the zoning board has jurisdiction over. That's very specific in the redevelopment plan. So they need to abide by all the use standards. If they don't, there's some variation. They would need to go back to Borough Council and get an amendment to the redevelopment plan. So there is a procedure for variances and relief from the plan, but it's really, it's not something they can just get a change. And at every step of this process, as has occurred already, but certainly down the line, there is an opportunity for community review at each step. So whether it's the Borough Council's review, whether it's the ordinance for the developer designation, and certainly site plan application for you, this board, there will be opportunity for public input. So with that, I'm going to happy to entertain questions from the board.
Thank you, Susan. Before I open this up to the board for any questions, I do not envision moving much past 10 o'clock at all. My original thought was 9:30, but I want to give people the opportunity to ask questions tonight. I don't anticipate finishing this tonight, but if none of you raise your hand, then maybe we will. But I would encourage you to do that. So first up, does anyone from the board have any questions or comments for Susan?
Susan, can you just kind of walk us through the timeline of, you know, when everything is happening? You know, like from whenever the recommendation is sent to the council and whenever if the council decides to act on the redevelopment plan, the timeline from that point going forward.
I think to some extent, the timeline is a little bit on how fast motivated the developer is, how much they want to push to be designated by the borough as a designated developer. And then that would initiate the process of the agreement. I don't think that's going to be a quick and easy agreement to come up with. There's a lot that needs to go in. So I would imagine at least a couple months. And that's going to involve your legal counsel, whoever is on the other side, be crafting that redevelopment agreement. 2 to 3 months, I would estimate. And then whenever they choose to come to the planning board is really on the applicant's timeline. And how quickly they can put a plan together, you know, a plan that would require all of the pages and documentation that a site plan application typically does. So there's a lot of work that they'll have to do on their end. I know that it's Reynolds, I know that they're working on financing and state agencies and all kinds of stuff that they're looking into to further their project. So it's not going to be like next week they submit a site plan application. I think it'll be pretty maybe 6 months if I had to guess, but it's really kind of on their time. So this is not a short-term prospect. Once it's approved, it's really a matter of, you all know how site plans work. They don't get shovels in the ground the day after they get approved either. So that's going to be a process as well. Whatever permitting they need, construction timelines. I can't give a specific on that, but this thing will not be built this year. I can guarantee you that. Questions?
Anybody else from the board? Does anyone from the public have a question?
I just have a question. So all the language that's laid out in this redevelopment plan draft, just so I'm clear, we had the public meetings. You've essentially taken all that information, you've parsed through it and distilled it into a series of kind of zoning criteria and design criteria. That's the guidelines that we're now looking at. And essentially saying we're good with this to pass on to council. So
It's
the,
almost like a really detailed plan of change.
yeah. So just a couple questions on like some of the proposed massing, building massing diagrams and that sort of thing. These are just essentially illustrations of building massing principles. They're not actually proposed footprints.
Correct. I mean, they are based on concepts provided by the developer.
Yep.
And I hope we have enough caveats here. We say again and again, anything that's shown that's, you know, from the developer is illustrative or conceptual. It's in no way approving anything that they have proposed, but it's, you know, you kind of start from somewhere and you want to use an example building. So we use what they came up with and then impose on that. Where would we want to break up the building? How might we address massing for this particular building? But it's the same principles that would be applied to another building.
Sure. So the only, the one thing that jumped out at me is the large mass on the north end of the, what we're calling North Building, where we have the 241.7 feet. And just like in a quick plan diagram, it's a massive facade. And so, there's some language in the building massing design, fenestration articulation around, vertical breaks every 40 feet, you know, to try to break up in facade articulation, to try to break up these masses. I kind of wonder if, looking at that, if that language is enough to address a mass like that, where, you know, you at least put in building shall also incorporate meaningful breaks in roof line and cornice, at least every 100 feet. And I wonder if, you know, we should put in something that says meaningful breaks, meaningful vertical breaks, so that at least there's a little bit of room for the board to comment whether or not the articulation in the facade is enough or isn't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
1 foot job may not do it.
Right.
Yeah. So
Because I could see looking at that facade, that's 241 feet. And sure, they satisfied the criteria of a vertical break, but it's a 1 foot jog in the facade and it's still a massive wall.
exactly. I think that's an easy change to make, really giving you, again, that framework. So when they come to you for site plan, you've got something to hang your hat on it and you know how you can really push them.
Good idea.
But then you have Wilson.
Yeah, I'll follow up with what you said. I had the same concern on the along West Street. Where there's only a 5-foot sidewalk. And while there isn't a whole lot of residential along that corridor, I had the same concerns about mass, but what I wanted to ask you was, in kind of moving all these pieces around, obviously there are a lot of trade-offs that you tried to balance. What were like the top, top 3 trade-offs that, you kind of wrestled with in putting this to paper?
Well, I would have liked to have been able to potentially bury the high tension wires. I know Shauna had a conversation with JCPL, I think, not really feasible because of the weight. And that kind of is what it is. So there may be ways to incorporate that actually into the whole design and make it maybe an asset rather than, it's clearly a challenge. I think also the past use of this site, it's kind of a brownfield because it's been so long paved and kind of just no stormwater management. So there's not any known contamination, but as I understand, DEP doesn't really want to allow a lot of infiltration here. So there's some limitations about permeable pavement, unfortunately, which you may hear more about. They come back to you. That does limit how much permeable pavement they can put in. So normally we would obviously want to encourage most pavement to be permeable, pervious. That may not be possible from an engineering standpoint. So those are a couple trade-offs. I mean, like you all, I would like to see that one facade shrunk as well, or at least broken up even more. So hopefully we provided with the change enough teeth for you all to push for that. I think most everything else with the public amenity spaces, the public realm, we spend a lot of time on that because we feel like that's how a lot of the residents will experience the site. We want it to be a place like your new Marine Park, but a place where people can come and there might be special borough events. Kind of a new attraction, new place. So those are probably the top.
I mean, you added on page 19, you added,
Mike.
On page 19, you added some illustrations there about entrances to break up West Street. Is that something that, in addition to the illustration, we should try and like reduce the language?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a little bit about in the accompanying text, right above the photos, we talk about maintaining that residential scale that already exists. On West Street, we talk about mitigating impacts on the armory as a historic resource. Yeah, if you feel we need to kind of firm up that text a little bit to be consistent with the photos, that wouldn't hurt. Yeah, the idea is that they are clearly a smaller scale residential entrance. It's not a major apartment entrance. It's
Right, yeah.
suits, that kind of thing that really lends itself to what's happening crossing down the street already.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, sir, all the way in the back, how many of you anticipate having a question or concern? I'm just trying to, okay, so everybody. We're gonna limit comment. Here, this is just questions, by the way, not comment. We're breaking it up like we always do. We're gonna try and stick to 3 minutes so that we can get a majority of folks in tonight who want to speak. So please tell us who you are and your question.
I'm Liam Collins, 128 Wallace Street. I'm also on the Historic Preservation Commission. So my question is a general one, which is trying to understand the financing of the whole project. What is it gonna cost?
So let me just stop you.
It's gonna be the owner of all this at the end.
So none of that is appropriate for this board.
Okay.
That's all questions for the council, when the council, because the board's not in charge of that. We don't have anything to do with designating the developer. We don't have anything to do with deciding who the developer is. All this board is doing is looking at the plan itself and recommending a plan to the borough council. That's all gonna be questions for the council, not for this board.
Okay.
This board can't even consider financing or anything like that.
But there's a plan and somebody's gonna own the building in the end. Who's gonna own it?
And again, that's not appropriate for this board. The board can't even consider that legally. It has nothing to do with this board. The board doesn't get involved in it.
Until we get an application
Correct.
from a developer for the sites we're talking about, which won't be, I anticipate, for more than 6 months.
So the developer would own the properties that are being built.
Yes.
And that'll all be part of the redeveloper agreement that Borough Council will.
So when considering building the buildings, the Historic Preservation Commission has just hired a new consultant who is going to be coming up with guidelines for us to make decisions with. I'm wondering if the developer or the planning board would consider asking the developer to include the guidelines that are considered for historic preservation, architecture of the new building. The renditions I've seen are beautiful, but they're the first thing people are gonna see when they get off the train in Red Bank. And so if we could try to keep some of that to our roots of the Victorian river town, that would be nice.
While this zone is not in the jurisdiction of historic preservation, we would certainly take that all into account. Allow me to scold you, that was not really a question. That was really a comment. But
he did say, can we?
okay, all right. That's very important to us, how something's gonna look and how it's gonna make people feel, whether or not we approve of any kind of development. But I appreciate you bringing it up.
The train station.
Right, keep in mind, the train station's staying the way it is. Being rehabilitated though, I think, aren't they? They're not touching it? Okay, so.
And I should add, if that is something, if the board was interested in, you could add that to the plan. So that'd be legitimate, dealing with the architecture of the properties. You can definitely add that in if you wanted to.
If we hate it, we'll say so. At least I will. Mr. Boku, come on up. I did read what you gave me, and I do feel as though we have handled section number 1 in inadequate public notice already. So if you would please skip over that, I would appreciate it.
So, just William Poku, 90 Bank Street. Okay, so rather than go through what I had anticipated as a presentation, I gave the chair a light up, and Mr. Portman knows that I don't ambush, I let people know what I'm getting ready to talk about before I talk about it. So the main question is, what provisions do you have in all this planning to address the dwindling Black population in Red Bank? There's the gentrification of all these high density luxury developments that are coming in, and basically the presentation does not even address even the word gentrification or displacement. And that question has been posed to Ms. Susan Fabaji before during one of the presentations introducing the master plan. So as the president of the Greater Red Bank and of the CP, my main interest is how do we stem that displacement from starting on in 2000, about 20% of the Black population is now dwindled to 7%. That's the question.
Go ahead, Susan.
It's a tough question. I remember it from the master plan.
I have no idea.
We noted that demographic change is not unique to Red Bank, it's happening all over the region, unfortunately, and it's a real challenge that one site and one development can't necessarily address on its own. On the displacement question, I'm glad that was brought up because that is a requirement that you have to address in the state statute, in the redevelopment plan. Is there any displacement that would be caused by this development, a direct displacement? And there is no current residential usage on this site. There is a single family home that is part of the redevelopment area, but it's not occupied. It is not owned by Denholtz. There is no one living there. So there is no direct displacement. Gentrification is a challenge. Development happens and there's only so much that can be done. But I think that the affordable housing set aside here is a significant benefit. As I understand it with the upcoming 4th round, this is likely to satisfy on its own the borough's requirements for affordable housing. So it's a net public good for the. That's from an income standpoint. There's really not much we can do in terms of specifically targeting racial and ethnic groups to keep here, but we can get at the income question, and that is being addressed. Housing question.
Next up. Anyone from the public have a question? Come on up, man. I apologize, I usually write down everyone's name, and I did not write down yours. Marjorie.
So Marjorie Cavalier, West Side resident and HPC member. My question is, I don't know how to make it a question, but basically page 21 through 23 and page 31 deals with the bus drop-off and queuing. And I guess if I had to do a question, it would be, how can you take that bus turnaround and put it on a residential street like West?
Yeah, it's going to be a question that more analysis is needed on. I do know that New Jersey Transit has actually looked at it, and this is where they are proposing bus stop. This is not coming from the developer, it's coming from New Jersey Transit. Closer?
Yeah, closer.
So that will be looked at as part of the traffic and parking study that required that the developer undertake. That we look particularly at West Street, but Monmouth as well, and how that bus circulation would occur, making sure that it's safe in terms of pedestrian access to the bus stations, and the turnaround is possible as well.
And Marjorie, keep in mind that we're not locking that into anything here. They're gonna have to come up with a plan that New Jersey Transit is happy with and that our engineer likes, from a safety standpoint.
You've seen a lot of death down in that triangle. And it's scary.
I'm surprised I'm alive today, having played on those tracks my entire childhood.
There's nothing in this plan that binds their locations to be where they are now, at least that's what's proposed. So that is certainly subject to, as Chairman said, further work on the engineering side.
Okay, and the second question I have is, also in the same section on page 22 about the preservation of historic elements, while the train station itself is safe. I mean, you may put a Starbucks on the inside of it, which would make me cringe, because that's in the plan, markets, coffee shops.
I'd rather Dunkin' Donuts personally.
But you also say in the plan, misspelled a little bit, that the other markers could be relocated away from the historic triangle. So where in this plan would you put the O'Hearn marker, the gatekeeper's booth, the Basie bust, and the metal artwork? If you were gonna take it away from the historic triangle, where would you put it? Along the tracks?
I would say that relocation is unlikely for those provisions because all of those are in the area that's proposed for a public plaza, so most likely they would be incorporated as part of that design. It's really just in case there is the need for some kind of relocation. I think HPC would be heavily involved in that. Where would be
I hope
appropriate?
so, because, sorry, that's a comment, but if you understand the role of the State Office of Historic Preservation, it's really the local ordinances that protect the design guidelines. That's a comment.
And as I say, SHPO is
You're
also
doing well.
gonna have to be very involved in this too.
All they do is designate it as historic, and then they're done.
Well, I do know that there is some review that they have over this development, I should say.
We'll see.
And any changes of that are gonna come before this board, so you will have an opportunity to at least weigh in on that. And I agree, I don't think they're gonna be able to go far.
Well, if they have to move the gatekeeper's house, I'm afraid it will. Yes.
I don't think they're moving it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Suzanne?
Suzanne Scully, West Side, speaking for myself and the board that I am on. I think it was slide 11, you know, listing, District A, what can go there. You listed a bunch of different items. One of them was retail cannabis. Not to open a can of worms, if you already have all the licensed use, are you saying if a license closes, like the one in Wawa, there's plenty of traffic there, that we can have cannabis there, or is this opening up a can of worms where they're having more licenses?
This definitely is not creating another location for a license.
So what would happen?
I think one would have to close. We're capped at 3 right now. And if one of them closes, then someone can open somewhere else in a permitted zone.
I just want to clarify because. I think it was slide. There was a slide after we were mentioning about the 6-story and the 5 stories, and you said that was just an opening. It's not necessarily guaranteed, and then.
That would be the maximum.
Maximum, okay, and you said you don't want to go back to the drawing board if they decide to go to that maximum. It's just kind of funny because. One of the articles, they were speaking about the 6-story, building and a 5-story building, one of the Red Bank Green articles. So is it possible though for whoever decides to build there to even ask for more, or the cap is period?
That's the cap.
And
That's the cap and personally, they can ask anything they want. I personally have made it clear that I have no interest in anything a foot taller than 6 stories. I'm not even sure I like 6 stories. 7 for me personally is an absolute non-starter, and I've made that clear.
With that being said, I think in the past, and I guess this is in the process, in one of the meetings I went to, there was a rendition about how a tall building would affect the surrounding areas, which gave residents and people in that vicinity a feel on how this tall building would hit us, either the sunlight or our viewing. It seemed that be something coming down the road, because when you look at like Cedar Crossing, they built the condos in Dr. James. It's kind of ridiculous. You got this tall building, you were finding ones right there. It just kind of.
These buildings are gonna be tall. They're gonna be my guess is between 5 and 6 stories. The sunlight that is enjoyed by people on their property is not a preserved right. If someone is allowed to build a 10-story building next to you, you're gonna have more shade than you had before. That's just the way it is, but we're not interested in particularly tall buildings here. 5 to 6 stories, I think, is the most you'll see, especially if the mayor and council adopts this redevelopment plan. We're saying in the plan, we're really not interested in anything taller than that. Doesn't mean someone isn't gonna ask, because they've asked before.
And if they
Also require either a variance or an actual amendment to the redevelopment.
And my dead body.
Leslie, with all this talk what's possibly gonna happen here, how or when do we bring in the infrastructure? Because at the, there was an article just written too about how they couldn't grow pot or letter shoot because it wasn't like enough electricity. Now you wanna put all this stuff in there too, so is there gonna be enough infrastructure to sustain all these units? For example, grow in the pot and, power for all these apartments.
That's gonna all have to be addressed in site plan review. You're a professional, we're professionals, engineers will have to review that. The applicant would have to submit documentation that there is infrastructure adequate to handle.
It depends on the size of the building, depends on how many apartments, how much water they need. All of that, we can't speak to until we get a plan. We don't have a plan.
No, that's fair. And then lastly, you said that we need to hire a redevelopment agency. Is that gonna be for open bidding or are we just resort to the council just to, is that going for open bidding?
We're not gonna hire an agency. We may hire a professional, or the council may hire a professional to help them in the same way that we hired Susan and her firm to help us through this part of it.
And be clear, the planning board would not play a role in that would be up to the council completely.
The council action,
Yeah.
likely, certainly will require their legal counsel and may require some financial expertise as well, so.
Gary leaned over to the mayor a little while ago and said the lawyers are gonna kill it on this one.
But for that, does that have to be open bid or is that, can you just?
Again, it's not, you'd have to ask the mayor and council that. The board has no control over that whatsoever.
Well, if you do the process. If there was a-
No, and what I'm telling you, it's not a good question to ask us because we're not qualified to answer that. This is the planning board. You'd have to ask the council that.
Other questions, folks?
Good evening. John Anderson, I am the chairman of Red Bank River Center. We want to better understand what the maximum square footage of commercial space would be on a parcel land with itself.
There is no firm maximum. Some of that is limited by the fact that all non-residential uses are limited to the core only. And when I say non-residential, it's not all commercial necessarily. There's retail permitted here, but there's also a number of other non-residential uses like daycare, art galleries, museums that are not retail necessarily or commercial, that can still be allowed. So what's really gonna drive the actual square footage of that non-residential space is gonna be the building itself. They are limited, obviously, on the overall height, the overall density, the residential density. So residential is gonna fill in the upper floors. Residential is not prohibited from ground floor, so we expect that there'll be some ground floor residential space as well. It's not all gonna be non-residential. So that's really gonna be a function of when they come in with an actual building. And what they feel that their market's gonna support.
So just in terms of the actual standard, like the cap or where they would top out at under this plan. Can you help me understand using the non-residential floor area and the size of these parcels, what they could build in commercial or non-residential space?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you like a number right now, but they are limited to an overall residential density of 58 units per acre. So that's gonna be their residential max. They are limited on setbacks and height, so that's gonna give you the actual shell of the building. They're also limited on coverage. And then the amount of which of the ground floor of that building they choose to fill with non-residential space is really gonna be a function of their proposal, what they feel they can get in terms of tenants, what they want the tenant mix to be, and who those tenants are.
Right, so how many acres is, calling it parcel A, north and south, how many acres is that?
So parcel A, minimum lot size is 3.5 acres, south parcel is 4 acres. Now that north parcel also includes minimum amount of open space, which I should have had on this slide actually. And that's to accommodate the public plaza, the new street, the shared street that is proposed, the open walkway. So all of that is sort of dedicated as public space. Not building.
That's a minimum parcel size, but how big is the actual parcel?
I have to go back to the designation study.
Probably best to wait for a plan whenever we get one.
Well, I mean, you're establishing an ordinance that has a floor area ratio. They have a certain amount of land. We didn't review that floor area ratio earlier, it wasn't on the slide. Just trying to help, my constituents at Red Bank River Center understand if we're gonna be advancing the goal of complementary rather than competitive uses or not. And to understand that, I think I have to understand the upper echelon, how much commercial space could we have here under the floor area ratio standards you're being asked to adopt.
Susan, could you work on that for us to have at the next meeting?
To work on that, yeah, I've heard the comment, there's some concern about competition. I hear that, the idea of the broad array of permitted uses that are proposed here was somewhat responsive to what we heard during the community engagement, really the desire for community focused uses. A lot of these uses I don't think are allowed in your current commercial districts, or at least not particularly viable, because many of them require larger floor plates. It might be more ideal for a spot like this, like for example, performance spaces or museum, obviously apart from Count Basie itself. So here you can look at whether there are additional square limits.
Just to follow up, would there be any consideration to imposing a subcategory, a sub-limitation on retail, restaurant and office, given that we have downtown already, we have Monmouth Street, we have Broad Street, we have Front Street, where a lot of these types of uses exist, so.
I would be loath to impose that kind of detail on the uses and the mix of uses, mainly because, particularly with the redevelopment plan, if you need a change on those uses, that is not a variance that the planning board can give. So they'd have to come back every time they had a different user that maybe didn't quite fit in with whatever mix and number we came up with. It's really hard to predict exactly what's going to happen in 2 years, 5 years. I saying to Sean, I had a redevelopment plan that was done just before COVID, had very specific set asides for non-residential requirements. They had to come back and amend that because with COVID, retail suddenly became not viable. They needed more residential. So you want to build in a little bit of flexibility, but I hear you, and we can look at some upper limit caps. And that is also something that the Borough Council can look at in more detail in the redevelopment agreement. So if there's like specific provisions that they would like to see on retail mix, some kind of limitations, that's something that the redeveloper can address. And that's not something that has to be, wholesale amended the same way that a redevelopment plan does.
And as much as over the years we've wanted to connect Broad Street to the train station, this could help with that.
I don't disagree.
I certainly, I wouldn't want to force someone to have to go to Broad Street for a specific use.
No, and I'm not saying to prohibit the uses, I'm just trying to get a sense of what the scale or scope of the uses.
Okay,
And that's
we'll
all.
try and get you some of that at the next meeting.
I know there's a ratio in there that wasn't specifically addressed tonight. I don't have the overall acreage, but if you have the acreage and you have the ratio, you can do the math and figure out what the allowable square footage is.
You can hire yourself an engineer.
And I can do the calculations based upon the minimum lot size, but that's a minimum, not a maximum.
You're right.
If the lot's bigger, then the space gets bigger.
Yeah, I apologize that the FAR got left off that table and looking at the plan to it, as did the minimum public space, which is 10%
Jumped at it because.
on that north parcel.
The more interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else in the public have a question for the board, for Susan? Anything you want to? You are Mr. Ansell, 39 Branch Avenue, correct?
This is probably more of a general question, just in terms of how transit villages are, the density, the size, the scale of the building transit villages are worked out. I mean, this is prospectively a huge development in a town which, certainly when I moved here 20 years ago was, you know, a quaint Victorian, low level sort of building type of town. I think a lot of the residents in the town are very concerned about just the size, the scale of this development and how it's going to affect it. I'm just interested to know how a development of this size in terms of like a transit village and its density and the number of units is sort of worked out. It just seems like a gargantuan development in a town which, in terms of its personality, doesn't really, I don't think, really deserves to have something of this size.
I'm not really sure I hear a question in here, but I can try to answer.
Well,
Is there an equation? Is there a basic, is there one scientific equation where it says, you know, to support a transit village, you need X number of units per square foot or per square?
Nobody hates tall buildings more than me.
Sorry?
Nobody hates tall buildings more than me.
Right.
And I think that there's probably some formula that someone has that I can't speak to. But remember, New Jersey Transit's a partner here. A great deal of this property is theirs.
Yeah.
Their chosen developer has purchased other properties like Mayo Clinic, the house behind it, and probably some other stuff that I'm not even aware of.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking at something that's 4 acres, you can probably fit a certain number of units inside of 4 acres versus 8 acres. And this is a very long spot. They've obviously decided, both New Jersey Transit and their developer, that 2 buildings make sense because of the way the rail line bisects the property. Well, it's 2 separate sections. Is it 4 separate buildings?
It's two separate sections.
Yeah, it's two sections. So there, when you look at a certain number of acres, there's a reasonable number of units in that case, or commercial square footage that someone might want. And then there's someone who's always going to want more than that. And that's where the voice of the residents and a board really looks into this from the whole town standpoint, that we say is too much or too little. I don't know where we could refer you to a formula along those lines.
It's like the deal for a formula, there are sort of overall standards. I mean, I know you previously had 35 units to the acre in your existing train station zoning. That has proven not to be dense enough to facilitate development. I think that was the guidance you also got from the state DOT in the transit village process. There's not a magic number necessarily. There are kind of ranges that we're seeing in TODs elsewhere in the state and the region. Every developer is going to come in and more probably than the municipality is comfortable with. They're going to have their internal number that they need to meet to make it actually financially work.
Which we have said publicly more than once, we don't care what their number is.
That's part of the question is like, had anybody considered a mixed sort of sized group of buildings, for example? And again, I'm not a town planner, you know, that's why you guys are all here. But as a concerned resident, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, do we need 2 gargantuan 400 unit apartment buildings when realistically, if you want to keep the character of the town sort of intact, could it be a mix of apartment buildings and townhouses, for example? Could that work? It's probably not gonna satisfy the developer because they want to squeeze every last ounce of cash they can out of their development. Obviously, I mean, I'm not stupid. I know how this stuff works. But as a group of people that have lived here for a long time and love this place, is there an argument to say, well, maybe it doesn't need to be 400 units? Could it be 200 units and then a bunch of townhouses? For example, could it be?
Yes, and that argument will take place when we see an actual plan.
Okay.
And we're not against that argument. We're all residents living here too.
Yeah. But my sense is the plan is only going to be what is currently on the table or possibly even bigger.
No, it cannot be bigger.
It can,
without
yeah.
an amendment to the
That's where
plan.
my dead body comes in again, not happening.
Okay.
So what the plan does is create the overall parameters. They will ultimately come in, if it's this developer, if it's somebody else, but working under the parameters of this plan, they'll have to come into the board and make their argument. And I'm sure this board is gonna have opinions on how dense it is, how tall it is, what it looks like. So it is definitely not the last word, but I can assure you that it's not gonna get bigger without having to come back and beg for a change to the redevelopment plan, which would be a whole reopening of this process.
And I don't love the idea of 400 units either. I grew up in this neighborhood. My grandparents lived on Shrewsbury Avenue. My grandfather had his plumbing supply at 66 Bridge Avenue. I grew up across the street from where this is gonna be. And I don't know that I love 400 units either. But until we see a whole plan, people ask so many questions about this like it's been designed. And there's so many parameters yet to look at.
Absolutely.
That I think will make it very interesting.
I guess the last thing is, could it potentially be smaller?
It always be small.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
These are maximums.
We're gonna take one more, folks. Who wants it?
Sarah Ellen Mess, 95 Hudson Avenue. You know, I've made myself so many notes and I've looked at so much stuff and now I'm totally confused. So I'll try to, let me say I agree with a lot of what Mr. Ansel has said. I would, in my mind, my concern, I have a couple of concerns. One is density.
Almost limit questions, please.
I know, well, I'm just trying to get organized my thoughts. Density parking, the shared street concept, and of course, the design. So, Susan, you've calculated density based on an area of 11 acres. But as your presentation showed, a lot of that 11 is really not buildable. It's the railroad yard, it's the rail track. So why are we using the larger area to calculate density when if we use the actual buildable lots to calculate density, that would drive your density numbers up, which might then require that you amend some of these recommendations that you have to bring it down. So, and it's, I don't know if that makes sense, but why are you using 11 acres when you only have 7.5 buildable acres?
Well, because the determination of buildable acres hasn't been made yet. So using the overall density as its basis of square footage, units per acre is the standard with density. So you've got to go from the overall, because at this point, we don't have a plan. We don't know what areas are being set aside for infrastructure, what areas are being set aside for open space, so what might ultimately count or not count. And that's why it's tied not only to a units per acre measure, but also a overall maximum in terms of number of units. And it's whichever is less.
Well, I really think that the railroad tracks are not gonna be buildable, so I have to question that rationale. But in terms of parking, you're setting a maximum of 725 parking spaces. 150 of those are going to be surface parking.
No. Those 150 could be surface or in garage space.
Okay, so how many are actually gonna be surface?
That's unknown right now. That's why we have those maximums.
We won't know that till we get a plan. We're saying 150 need to be designated.
For commuters?
Correct, and they can either be in a building or on a surface lot. We don't necessarily care. What we care about is gonna change when we see a plan, which we haven't seen. So and New Jersey Transit knows they want 150 spaces. I used to drop my daughter off every morning to the train and there was no one there. So they've determined, New Jersey Transit has, that their number is 150, which probably seems about right to me, having gone there every morning at 7:15, which is a little early or a little late for some people. So I realize the number of commuters might have changed, but New Jersey Transit.
I realize they've never rebounded from.
No,
COVID.
no, they haven't.
So there are a lot of things going on, but I'm very concerned about this. And is this a recommendation actually for this shared street? You know, we
we get very enamored with some of these concepts, so there's something in here called a roof nerf. A roof nerf. Is that from the Netherlands?
From the Dutch, yes.
Okay, well, the Dutch, you know, they have great transit systems, they've got trams running all over the place. And they have a bicycle culture, you know, these guys go out on their bikes, drink a lot of beer. I mean, I've seen like pictures of bikes being pulled out of the canals there, but we don't have that kind of culture. And as much as we want it, it's gonna be a long time coming. So this idea right now that the traffic has, I believe, 6 ingress, egress, whatever it is, in and out of the train station, Monmouth Street, Oakland Street, Chestnut Street. And now, is this an actual proposal that we're gonna eliminate that ingress and egress on Oakland because we want this, you know, pedestrian fantasy that we're creating? Because in my mind, that's gonna just increase the congestion. So is this a proposal? Is it contingent on a true circulation plan? Because I see this as being very problematic. I picked up my son on Sunday, 10 a.m. at the train station, and the traffic was backed up, exiting the parking area onto Chestnut Street, because of course the gates were down, nobody could move westward, and therefore nobody could make the left turn to go eastward. And if you're gonna limit everything that's gonna be coming in and out, the commercial space traffic, the train drop-offs, the parking, the Amazon truck, the DoorDash, the drop-off for the childcare center. I mean, that's just gonna create more bottlenecks in a town that already has plenty.
So that's the proposal. It's a proposal as of now, and it would be subject, as the plan says, final design of both the shared street and the Oakland pedestrian walkway would be done with the borough engineer. It would also be accommodated in the redeveloper agreement. So again, we keep coming back to that redeveloper agreement that the borough council.
So that,
if I can finish, okay, the borough council is gonna have to craft. And then also specifically with the Oakland walkway, that is an existing borough street, so that would have to be vacated by borough ordinance. The borough obviously is the driver.
I know, but you know, there's something about this that inherent and just because a lot of this really echoes the Denholz plan. And I feel like we're basically approving that plan before we actually even go through it. But I know it's late and people wanna go shared street, parking.
Keep in mind, of course, that's the New Jersey Transit has chosen Denholtz as their developer. We have not yet. We meaning the town, the mayor and council. And you can't get through Oakland Street to the other side of the station anyway.
No, but you can get in and out of the parking lot and you can drop somebody off at the train station here.
And that's
And
why
you
we
can,
can
and
get
you
a
can
plan.
avoid the Chestnut Street bottleneck and you can avoid the Monmouth Street bottleneck that way.
And that's why when we get a plan, we'll look at all of that, as will our engineer.
I mean, those of us who live here have really spent a lot of time strategizing how we can get around town as quickly as possible.
I agree with you, as have I.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
May I just, having heard just some preliminary comments today, I just like. the
Mostly
conclusion
questions.
of the meeting.
You heard mostly questions.
Yes. Just put an exclamation mark on the very important need for housing and affordable housing. And that this project potential, maybe it's too large, maybe it's not, can bring 80 affordable units
Minimum.
to Red Bank. Minimum. Red Bank's population has declined since 2020. New Jersey's has grown 9% a year since 2010. If you were to apply that same standard to Red Bank, we should have another 1,000 residents, 1,200 residents than we have today, and have feet on the street and bring some vibrancy back to downtown and some housing that's very much needed. I think we need to keep some perspective on some of the main points as we go through this process.
Well, I feel that criticism is directed at my comment.
It is not.
I have to say that I am a proponent of, I do want to see the area developed. I want to see it something that's appropriate for the town. I am an advocate for affordable housing. I wish we could put 154 affordable units in that space. And units that are suitable for families, because that's another issue. Very few of these apartment buildings that are going up are really appropriate for families with children. So we're saying we only want a certain cohort of people. And if you look at the demographics of the town, and it's in the master plan, the biggest cohort is empty nesters. That's who's moving into these luxury apartments. So they're not people who are here already and are just need housing. They're people who are coming from out of state. So in my mind, the affordable housing policy of New Jersey is part of the problem because it has increased real estate speculation. It has driven people out of affordable rentals and because they weren't deed restricted, they don't count towards our fair share housing. Red Bank was always an affordable town where the working class people could raise their kids, and it's just not anymore. So I am a proponent of affordable housing, but these 80 units, believe me, are not gonna fix the problem. We have more homeless in this town than we've ever had, because I know many of these people, I know them by name, I see them every day. I speak with them, I try to help them where I work. And it's worse than ever, despite as we drive around here, we have all these big box developments going up, and it has made the problem worse.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Ladies and gentlemen, with a motion from a board member, we are going to carry this meeting to April 9th. There will be no further notice to the public. This is your notice. If you want to pick this up and have a question or comment about this, or just hear more about it as we move forward, I anticipate that we will finish this on April 9th. And one way or another, send our thoughts to the mayor and council, whichever way the board decides to go. So that is April 9th. Would someone like to make that motion to carry the meeting to April 9th? Wilson, thank you. Second?
Second.
There's with no further notice to the public.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you all for coming.
Minutes.
We didn't
One
do that.
meeting.
Minister,
February
12th.
February 12th. Oh,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February 12th. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I think I have to abstain.
yeah. You have-
Okay, so you're out.
Now you need a motion to adjourn.
And now we'd like a motion to adjourn. Second.
Yeah,
All in
no
favor?
minute.
Aye.
Please come.
Uh,
Schedule for
I
April
will-
9th.
I'm almost tired.
Okay.